connected.
So, what's your
And sat without a word of invitation. Picking up one of the untouched cups, she crossed her legs and sipped, watching Delana over the rim. Delana fixed her with a hard stare. Who do you think you are, woman? However high you think you stand, none stand higher than Aes Sedai. And where did you learn that sign? For perhaps the first time in her life, that stare did no good. Halima smiled at her mockingly. Do you really think the secrets of the, shall we say, darker Aja are that secret? As for how high you stand, you know very well that if a beggar gave the proper signs, you would leap to obey. My story is that I was traveling companion for a time to one Cabriana McCandus, a blue sister. Unfortunately, Cabriana died in a fall from her horse, and her warder simply refused to leave his blankets or eat after that. He died, too. Halima smiled as if to ask whether Delana was following. Cabriana and I talked a great deal before she died, and she told me about Salidar. She also told me a number of things she had learned about the White Tower's plans for you here, and for the Dragon Reborn. Another smile, a quick flash of white teeth, and she went back to her tea and her watching. Delana had never been a woman to give up easily. She had bludgeoned kings into making peace when they wanted war, dragged queens by the scruff of the neck to sign treaties that had to be signed. True, she would have obeyed that hypothetical beggar if he had the proper signs and said the right things, but Halima's hands had identified her as Black Aja, which she clearly was not. Perhaps the woman thought that was the only way to make Delana acknowledge her, and perhaps she wanted to show off her forbidden knowledge as well. Delana did not like this Halima, and I suppose I am supposed to make sure the Hall accepts your information, she said gruffly. It should be no problem so long as you know enough of Cabriana to support your tale. I can't help you there. I never met her above twice. I suppose there is no chance of her appearing to spoil your story. No chance at all. Again that quick, mocking smile. And I could recite Cabriana's life. I know things she had forgotten herself. Delana only nodded to that. Killing a sister was always to be regretted, but what must be, must be. Then there is no problem at all. The Hall will receive you as a guest, and I can make sure they listen. A guest is not exactly what I had in mind. Something rather more permanent, I think. Your secretary, or better yet, your companion. I need to make sure your hall is guided carefully. Beyond this tale of Cabriana's news, from time to time I'll have instructions for you. Now you listen to me. Halima cut her off without raising her voice. I was told to mention a name to you. A name I use sometimes. Arangar. Delana sat down heavily. That name had been mentioned in her dreams. For the first time in years, Delana Musalain was afraid.
Chapter 31. Red Wax. The sound of the Black Gelding's hooves was all but swallowed in the noise of Amador as Eamon rode slowly through the crowded streets. Sweat oozed from his every pore, the more for his perfectly polished mail and breastplate, gleaming despite a layer of dust, and the snowy cloak spread over the gelding's powerful rump. Yet it might have been a fine spring day for all the notice he took. He did his best to ignore the dirty men and women, even children, with lost expressions and travel-worn clothes. Even here. Even here. For once in his life, the great stone walls of the Fortress of the Light, towered and bannered and impregnable, bastion of truth and right, did not lift his spirits. Dismounting in the main courtyard, he tossed his reins to a child with graded instructions for caring for the animal. The man knew what to do, of course, but Valda wanted to snap at something. White-cloaked men scurried everywhere in a great show of energy despite the heat. He hoped there was something more than show behind it. Young Dane Bornhold came trotting across the courtyard, pressing fist to mailed chest in an eager salute. The light illumine you, my lord captain. You had a good ride from Tarvalon, yes? His eyes were bloodshot, and a smell of brandy wafted from him. There was no excuse for drinking during the day. Fast, at least, Valda growled, jerking off his gauntlets and stuffing them behind his sword belt. It was not the brandy, though he would make a mark against the man for it. The journey had been fast for that distance. He intended to give the Legion a night in the city by way of reward once they finished making camp outside the city. A fast journey, but he disapproved of the orders that called him back just when a strong push might have toppled the crippled tower and buried the witches under the rubble. A ride to be remarked, yet every day had brought worse news. Althor and Camelin. It did not really matter whether the man was a false dragon or the real one. He could channel, and any man who did that had to be a dark friend. Dragon-sworn rabble in Altara. His so-called prophet and his scum in Gildan, in Amadisia itself. He had managed to kill some of that filth at least, though it was hard fighting foes who melted away more often than they stood, who could blend into the accursed streams of refugees, and worse, of brainless wanderers who seemed to think Althor had turned all order on its head. He had found a solution, however, if not a completely satisfactory one. The roads behind his legion were littered now, and the ravens fed to bursting. If it was not possible to tell the prophet's trash from refugee trash, well then, kill whoever clogged the way. The innocent should have remained in their homes where they belonged. The Creator would shelter them anyway. As far as he was concerned, the wanderers were added plums on the cake. I heard in the city that Morghese is here, he said. He did not believe it. Every other word in Andor had been speculation over who killed Morghese, so he was startled when Dane nodded. Surprise turned to disgust as the young man babbled about Morghese's apartments and her hunting, how well she was treated, how she was sure to sign a treaty with the children any day. Valda scowled openly. He should have expected no better from Nile. The man had been one of the best soldiers in his time, accounted a great captain, but he grew old and soft. Valda had known that as soon as his orders reached Tarvalon. Nile should have moved on sheer strength with the first word of Althor. He would have gathered all the numbers he needed on the march. Nations would have rallied to the children against a false dragon. They would have then. Now Althor was in Camelin, and strong enough to frighten the faint-hearted. But Morghese was here. If he had Morghese, she would sign that treaty the first day if somebody had to guide her hand to hold the pen.
Okay, Ozzy?
By the light, he would teach her to leap when he said leap.
Come
If she
here,
balked
Ozzy.
at returning to Andor with the children, he would lash her to his staff by her wrists. That would be a banner to lead the advance into Andor. Dane ran down, waiting, no doubt hoping for an invitation to dinner this evening. As a junior, he could not issue one to an officer senior to him, but doubtless he hoped to talk with his old commander about Tarvalon, perhaps even about his dead father. Valda had not thought much of Jeffrey Bornhold. The man had been soft. I will see you at the camp for dinner at 6. I will see you sober, child Bornhold. Bornhold surely was in drink. He gaped and stammered before making his salute and going. Valda wondered what had happened. Dane had been a fine young officer, one who worried too much over niceties, such as proof of guilt when there was no way to obtain it.
Ozzy!
Yet still fine
Ozzy.
for all that. Not as weak as his father. Ashamed to see him waste himself in brandy. Muttering under his breath, officers drinking in the very Fortress of the Light was another sign that Nile was rotting at the core. Valda went in search of his rooms. He intended to sleep in the camp, but a hot bath would not be amiss. A square-shouldered young child approached in the plain stone corridor, the scarlet shepherd's crook of the Hand of the Light behind the flaring golden sun on his chest. Without stopping or even looking at Valda, the questioner murmured respectfully, "My Lord Captain might wish to visit the Dome of Truth." Valda frowned after the man. He did not like questioners. They did good work in their way, yet he could never escape the feeling that they had donned the crook because that way they would never have to face an armed foe. started to raise his voice and dress the fellow down, then stopped. Questioners were sloppy in their discipline, but a simple child would never speak idly to a Lord Captain. Perhaps the bath could wait. The Dome of Truth was a wonder that finally did restore some of his essence. Pure white outside, inside gold leaf cast down the light of 1,000 hanging lamps. Thick white columns ringed the chamber, plain and polished to glistening, but the dome itself stretched 100 paces across unsupported and rose 50 at its peak. Above the simple white marble dais, centered on the white marble floor, where the Lord Captain Commander of the Children of the Light stood to address the assembled children in their most solemn moments, their most serious ceremonies. He would stand there one day. Niall would not live forever. Dozens of children wandered about the vast chamber. It was a sight worth seeing, though none but the children ever did, of course. Yet that message had not come so he could admire the dome. He was sure of it. Behind the great columns ran rows of smaller ones, just as simple and polished just as highly, and tall alcoves where scenes of the children's triumphs made frescoes of 1,000 years. Valda strolled, looking into each recess. Finally, he saw a tall, graying man studying one of the paintings, Serenia Latar, being raised on the scaffold, the only Amerlin the children had ever managed to hang. She had been dead already, of course, like witches being somewhat hard to hang. But that was beside the point. 693 years ago, justice had been done according to the law. "Are you troubled, my son?" The voice was soft, almost mild. Valda stiffened slightly. Radha Masanawa might be the High Inquisitor, but he was still a questioner. And Valda was a Lord Captain anointed of the light, not my son. "Not that I have noticed," he said flatly. Asanawa sighed. His gaunt face was a picture of martyred suffering, so that his sweat might have been taken for tears. But his deep-set eyes seemed to burn with the heat that had boiled away all his spare flesh. His cloak bore only the crook, no flaring golden sun, as though he stood outside the children, or perhaps above. "The times are troubled. The fortress of the light harbors a witch." Valda suppressed a wry look before it formed. Cowards or not, questioners could be dangerous, even to a Lord Captain. The man might never be able to hang an Amerlin, but he probably dreamed of being the first to hang a queen. Valda did not care whether Morghese died, provided it was not before all the use was wrung out of her. He said nothing, and Asanawa's thick gray eyebrows drew down until he seemed to peer out of caverns. "The times are troubled," he said again, "and Niall must not be allowed to destroy."
Ozzy, everyone wants to lean back. Come on.
For long minutes, Valda examined the painting. Perhaps the artist had been good, perhaps not. He knew nothing of such things, and cared even less. The fellow had gotten the weapons and armor right on the guards, though, and the rope and scaffold looked real. Those were things he knew. "I am prepared to listen," he said finally. "Then we will talk, my son. Later, when there are fewer eyes to see and
He wants to go
ears
down
to
there.
hear.
Raise hell.
The light illumine you, my son." Asanawa strode away without another word, White Cloak billowing slightly and the sound of his boots echoing, as if he was trying to drive every step into the stone. Some of the children bowed deeply as he passed. From a narrow window high above the courtyard, Niall watched Valda dismount and speak to young Bornhold, then stalk away in a fury. Valda was always in a fury. Had there been some means to bring the children home from Tarvalin and leave Valda there, Niall would have jumped at it. The man was a fair enough battle commander, but better suited to rousing mobs. His notion of tactics was the charge, and of strategy, the charge. Shaking his head, Niall made his way to his audience chamber. He had more important things than Valda to concern him. Morghese was still resisting like an army on the heights with water and high morale. She refused to admit she held a valley floor with no way out, and it was her enemy who had the heights. Bulwer rose from his table as Niall entered the anteroom.
O'Myrna was here,
Hey.
my lord.
You
He
two
left
behave.
these for
Ozzy.
you.
Bulwer touched a sheaf of papers tied with a red ribbon on the table. And
Come here,
lips.
Luna. Ozzy.
Thin lips tightened as he
Cut it
drew a
out.
tiny bone tube from his pocket. Niall took the tube with a mutter and stumped into the inner room. O'Myrna was becoming more useless every day for some reason. Leaving his reports with Bulwer was bad enough, nonsense as they were. But even O'Myrna knew better than to hand one of these tubes with 3 red stripes to anyone but Niall himself. He held the tube close to a lamp to examine the wax. Unbroken before his thumbnail pierced it. He would have to light a fire under O'Myrna, put the fear of the light into him. The fool was no good as a decoy unless he played the consummate spy master as far as he was able.
Give me a sec.
The message was from Varden again, Niall's private cipher in that mad, spidery scrawl on a strip of thin paper. He almost burned it unread, and something at the end caught his eye. Beginning at the beginning, he consciously worked the cipher in his mind. He wanted to be absolutely sure. Just as before, it was gibberish about Aes Sedai unleashes and strange beasts, but right at the last, Varden had helped Asadim Faizar find a hiding place in Tanchico. He would try to smuggle Faizar out, but the Forerunners kept such a guard that a whisper could not pass the walls without permission. Niall rubbed his chin in thought.
Ozzy, leave her alone. Come here.
Faizar was one of those he had sent to Tarabon to see if anything could be salvaged. Faizar knew nothing of Varden, and Varden should know nothing of Faizar. The Forerunners kept such a guard that not a whisper could pass the walls. A madman's scrawl. Stuffing the paper into his pocket, he returned to the antechamber. Bulwer, what is the latest from the west? Between them, the west always meant the border with Tarabon.
No change from before, my lord. Patrols that penetrate very deeply into Tarabon do not return. The worst trouble near the border is refugees trying to cross.
Patrols that penetrated too deeply. Tarabon was a pit, writhing with poisonous vipers and rabid rats, but
How quickly could we get a courier to Tanchico?
Bulwer did not even blink. The man would not show surprise if one day his horse spoke to him.
The problem will be fresh horses once he crosses the border, my lord. Normally, I would say 20 days there and back, perhaps a few less with luck. Now, twice that with luck. Maybe twice that just to reach Tanchico.
A pit that could swallow a courier and not even leave bones behind. There would be no need for a return, but Niall kept that to himself.
Let it be arranged, Bulwer. I will have a letter ready in an hour. I will speak to the courier myself.
Bulwer bowed his head in assent, but dry washed his hands at the same time, insulted. Let him be. There was a small chance this could be done without exposing Varadin. Unnecessary precaution if he was insane, of course, but if not, revealing him would not make anything happen faster. Back in the audience chamber, Niall studied Varadin's message once more before holding the slip in a lamp flame, watching it catch. He crumpled the ash between his fingers. He had 4 rules concerning action and information. Never make a plan without knowing as much as you can of the enemy. Never be afraid to change your plans when you receive new information. Never believe you know everything, and never wait to know everything. The man who waited to know everything was still sitting in his tent when the enemy burned it over his head. Niall followed those rules. Only once in his life had he abandoned them to follow a hunch. At Jamara, for no reason but a tickling at the back of his head, he had set a third of his army to watch mountains all said were impassable. While he maneuvered the rest of his forces to crush the Mirandians and Altarans, an Illianer army that was supposed to be 100 miles away came out of those impassable passes. The only reason he managed to withdraw without being crushed was a feeling. And now he felt that tickling again.
I do not trust him, Talanvor said firmly. He reminds me of a young sharp I saw at the fair once, a baby-faced fellow who could look you in the eye and grin while he was palming the pea from under its cup. For once, Morghese had no difficulty holding her temper. Young Piter had reported that his uncle had finally found a way to smuggle her out of the Fortress of the Light, her and the others. The others had been the rub. Torwin Barshaw had claimed himself able to get her out alone long since, but she would not leave them behind to the mercies of the White Cloaks. Not even Talanvor. I will make a note of your feelings, she said indulgently. Just do not let them hinder you. Do you have a saying that fits, Lini? Something for young Talanvor and his feelings? Light. Why did she take such delight in taunting him? He came close to treason, but she was his queen, not... The rest of the thought would not come. Lini sat near the windows, rolling a ball of blue yarn from the skein Brianna held stretched on her hands. Piter reminds me of that young undergroom just before you went to the White Tower. The one who got 2 maids with child and was caught trying to sneak away from the manor with a sackful of your mother's plate. Morghese's jaw hardened, but nothing could spoil her pleasure. Not even the glance Brianna gave her, as if she should be allowed to state her opinion as well. Piter had been overjoyed at Morghese's impending escape. Of course, part of that was because he apparently expected some sort of reward from his uncle for his part. At least a few of his comments suggested it. Something about making up for a failure back home. But the young man practically danced when she agreed to the plan that would have them all out of the fortress today and out of Amador by sunrise tomorrow. Away from Amador and on the road to Gildan, where soldiers would not come with strings to tie to Andor. 2 days ago, Barshaw himself came to unfold the scheme, disguised as a shopkeeper delivering knitting needles and yarn, a squat, big-nosed man with a choleric eye and a sneering mouth, though the words came out respectfully enough. It was hard to believe him Piter's uncle. They looked so different, much less a merchant. Still, his plan was a marvel of simplicity, if hardly dignified, needing only enough people outside the fortress to make it work. Morghese was going to ride out of the Fortress of the Light, buried in the bottom of a cartload of kitchen refuse. Now you all know what to do, she told them. So long as she herself was in her rooms, the rest could move about with considerable freedom. Everything depended on that. Well, not everything, but certainly every escape but her own. Lini, you and Brianna must be in the laundry yard when the bell sounds high. Lini nodded complacently, but Brianna gave her a purse-lipped look. They had been over this 20 times. Even so, Morghese was not going to allow a mistake to result in anyone being left behind. Talanvor, you will leave your sword behind and wait at an inn called the Oak and Thorn. He opened his mouth, but she forestalled him firmly. I have heard your arguments. You can find another sword. They'll believe you mean to return if you leave it. He grimaced, but finally nodded. Lam Gwyn is to wait at the Golden Head, and Basil at... A hasty tap at the door, and it opened enough to admit Basil's balding head. My queen, there's a man, a child. He glanced over his shoulder into the hall. There's a questioner, my queen. Talanvor's hands went to his sword hilt, of course, and he would not take them away until she had gestured twice and grimaced at him beside. Admit him? She managed a calm voice, but butterflies the size of foxes fluttered frantically in her belly. A questioner? Was everything that suddenly had been going so well about to turn just as suddenly to disaster? A tall, hawk-nosed man pushed Basil out of the way and closed the door in his face. The white and gold tabard with the crimson crook on his shoulder gave his rank as Inquisitor. She had not met Ainur Saren, but he had been pointed out to her. There was a set of unalterable certainty to his face. You are summoned to the Lord Captain Commander, he said coldly. You will come now. Morghese's thoughts raced faster than the butterflies. She was used to being summoned. Niall did not come to her, now he had her in the fortress. Called before the man for another lecture on her duty to Andor, or for what was supposed to be a friendly chat, to show her that Nile had her best interests and Andor's at heart. Used to that, but not to this sort of messenger. If she was being given over to the questioners, there would be no subterfuge. Asunawa would send enough men to drag her away and everyone with her. Him she had met briefly. He made her blood freeze. Why had an inquisitor been sent? She voiced the question, and Saren replied in the same icy tones. I was with the Lord Captain Commander, and I was coming this way. I have finished my business, and now I will take you back. After all, you are a queen. Due respect. That all sounded slightly bored, somewhat impatient, until the last, when a note of wry mockery entered. No warmth, though. Very well, she said. Shall I accompany my queen? Talanvor bowed formally. At least he made a display of deference when any outsider was around. No. She would take Lamgwin instead. No, any of the men would make it seem she thought she needed bodyguards. Saren frightened her nearly as much as Asunawa did, and she would not let him catch even a hint of the fact. She put on a casual, tolerant smile. Surely I need no protection here? Saren smiled too, or at least his mouth did. He seemed to be laughing at her. Outside, with Basil and Lamgwin looking at her uncertainly, she almost changed her mind about attendance. She would have, had she not spoken inside. But two men could not protect her if this really was some elaborate trap, and changing her mind would be a show of weakness. Walking through the stone corridors beside Saren, she certainly felt weak, not like a queen at all. No. Maybe she would scream like anyone else if the questioners had her in their dungeons. Well, there was no maybe about it. She was not fool enough to believe royal flesh different from any other in that regard. But until then, she would be what she was. Deliberately, she set about flogging down those butterflies. Saren led her into a small flagstone-paved courtyard where bare-chested men were hacking at wooden posts with swords. Where are we going? She demanded. This is not the way I have gone to the Lord Captain Commander's study before. Is he somewhere else? I take the shortest way, he replied curtly. I have more important matters to see to than... He did not finish, and he did not slow either. She had no choice but to follow, down a corridor lined with long rooms full of narrow cots and men often bare-chested, or in less. She kept her eyes fixed on Saren's back, composing the blistering sentences she meant to deliver to Nile. Across a stable yard, the smell of horses and dung heavy in the air, and a farrier shoeing horses in one corner, along another barracks hallway, and then one with kitchens down one side, and the thick smell of stew cooking, into another courtyard. She stopped dead. A long, high scaffold stood in the middle of the yard. 3 women and over a dozen men filled every space, hands and feet bound, nooses snugged around their necks. Some wept piteously. Most only looked terrified. The last 2 men on the far end were Torwin Barshaw and Piter, the boy in his shirt sleeves instead of the red and white coat she had made for him. Piter was not weeping, but his uncle was. Piter appeared too horrified to think of tears. For the light, a white cloak officer called out, and another white cloak shoved a long lever at the end of the scaffold. Trapdoors snapped open with loud cracks, and the victims fell from sight. Some of the stretched ropes quivered as those at the end choked their lives away instead of dying quickly from a broken neck. Piter's was one of those, and her fine escape died with him. Perhaps she should have had as much concern for him, but it was the escape she thought of, her way out of the trap she had walked into, herself trapped, and Andor with her. Saren was looking at her, plainly expecting her to faint or sick up. So many at once, she said, proud of the steadiness in her voice. Piter's rope had stopped jerking. It only swung slowly from side to side now. No escape. We hang dark friends every day, Saren answered dryly. Perhaps in Andor you release them with a lecture. We do not. Morgaze met his gaze. The shortest way? So this was Niall's new tactic. It did not surprise her that no mention had been made of her planned escape. Niall was too subtle for that. She was an honored guest, and Piter and his uncle had been hanged by chance for some crime that had nothing to do with her. Who would be the next to mount the gallows? Lamgwin or Basil? Linny or Talanvor? Strange, but the image of Talanvor with a rope around his neck hurt more than the image of Linny. The mind played peculiar tricks. Over Saren's shoulder, she caught sight of Asunawa at a window overlooking the scaffold. He was staring down at her. Maybe this was his doing, not Niall's. It made no difference. She could not let her people die for nothing. She could not let Talanvor die. Very peculiar tricks. Arching an eyebrow mockingly, she said, "If this has unhinged your knees, I suppose we can wait until you find your strength again." A light voice, not affected at all by what she saw. Light. Let her not vomit. Saren's face darkened, and he turned on his heel and stalked away. She followed at a stately pace, not looking up at Asunawa's window, trying not to think of the scaffold. Perhaps it really was the shortest way, for in the next corridor, Saren led her up steep flights of stairs, delivering her to Niall's audience chamber more quickly than she remembered making the journey before. As usual, Niall did not rise, and there was no chair for her to take, so she was forced to stand before him like a petitioner. He seemed distracted, sitting silent and staring at her, but not really seeing her. He had won, and he did not even see her. That irritated her. Light! He had won. Perhaps she should return to her rooms. If she told Talanvor and Lamgwin and Basil to carve a path for her, they would try. They would die, and so would she. She had never held a sword, but if she gave that command, she would take one up. She would die, and Elaine would ascend the Lion Throne. She would, as soon as Althor could be pushed from it. The White Tower would see that Elaine got what was hers. The Tower. If the Tower secured the throne for Elaine, it seemed mad, yet she trusted the Tower even less than she did Niall. No, she had to save Andor herself, but the cost. The cost must be paid. She had to force the words out. "I'm ready to sign your treaty." Niall hardly appeared to hear at first. Then he blinked and suddenly laughed wryly and shook his head. That irritated her too, pretending surprise. She had not tried to escape. She was a guest. She wished she could see him on a gallows. He moved into action so quickly that he almost dispelled the memory of his earlier apathy. In moments, he had his dried-up little secretary in with a long parchment, everything already written out, and even a copy of the Seal of Andor she could not tell from the original. Choice or no choice, she made a show of reading the terms. They were no different than she had expected. Niall would lead the White Cloaks to regain her throne, but there was a price, if not named as such. 1,000 White Cloaks quartered in Camelin with their own courts of law outside Andoran law in perpetuity. White Cloaks to stand equal with the Queen's guards throughout Andor in perpetuity. It might take her lifetime to undo signing this, and Elaine's as well, but the alternative was Althor with the Lion Throne as a trophy. If any woman ever sat on it again, it would be Elenia or Nian or one of that ilk, and as Althor's puppet. That, or Elaine as the Tower's puppet. She could not make herself trust the Tower. She signed her name clearly, pressed the copied seal into the red wax that Niall's secretary dripped at the foot of the sheet. The Lion of Andor surrounded by the rose crown. There. She was the first queen ever to accept foreign soldiers on Andoran soil. How soon? It was harder to say than she had imagined. How soon will your legions ride? Niall hesitated, glancing down the table. There was nothing there except pen and ink, a sand bowl and a freshly burned down stub of sealing wax, as if he had very recently written a letter. He finished scrawling his signature on the treaty and impressed his own seal, a flaring sun in golden wax. then handed the parchment to his secretary. Put this in the document room, Balwer. I fear I cannot move as quickly as I had hoped, Morgaze. There are developments I must consider. Nothing that need concern you. Simply a matter of how best to move in areas unrelated to Andor. I insist you take this as simply more time for me to enjoy your company. Balwer bowed smoothly, if somewhat prissily, yet she was almost certain his eyes nearly jerked toward Nile in surprise. She herself nearly gaped. He pressed her, and now he had other matters to consider? Balwer scurried out as though afraid she might try to snatch back the treaty and tear it up, but that was the furthest thing from her mind. At least there would be no more hangings. The rest would be dealt with when it could be. One step at a time. Her dogged resistance had failed, but now she had time again, an unexpected gift not to be wasted. The pleasure of her company. She put on a warm smile. It seems as though a weight has lifted from my shoulders. Tell me, do you play stones? I am accounted a fair player. His answering smile was surprised at first, then amused. Morgaze flushed, but managed to keep her face from showing anger. Perhaps it was best that he thought her broken now. No one watched a broken opponent too closely or regarded them too highly, and if she was careful, with time she could begin recovering what she had given away before his soldiers left Amadisia. She had had a very good teacher in the game of houses. I will try not to provide too poor a match, if you would like to play. She was well beyond fair herself, perhaps even beyond good, but she would have to lose, of course, though not so badly that he grew bored. She hated losing.
Frowning, Asinawa drummed his fingers on the gilded arm of his chair. Above his head, the shepherd's crook was worked in brilliant lacquer on a pure white disc. The witch was taken aback, he murmured. Sarn answered as though it was an accusation. Some people are affected that way by hanging. The Dark Friends were rounded up yesterday. I'm told they were chanting some catechism to the shadow when Trom broke down the door. I checked, but no one thought to ask if they had any connection to her. At least he did not shift his feet. He stood as straight as any hand of the light should. Asinawa dismissed explanations with a slight wave of his hand. Of course there was no connection, aside from the fact that she was a witch and they Dark Friends. The witch was in the Fortress of the Light, after all. Still, he was troubled. Niall sent me to fetch her as if I were a dog, Sarn grated. I almost spewed up my stomach standing so close to a witch. My hands wanted her throat. Asinawa did not bother to respond. He hardly heard. Of course, Niall hated the hand. Most men hated what they feared. No, his mind was on Morgaze. She was not weak, by all accounts. She had certainly fended off Niall well enough. Most people would have collapsed as soon as they were inside the fortress. She would ruin some of his plans if she turned out to be weak after all. He had all the details in his mind. Each day of her trial, with ambassadors on hand from every land that could still produce one, until finally her dramatic confession, wrung from her so skillfully, no one would ever find the mark. And then the ceremonies surrounding her execution. A special gallows just for her, to be preserved afterwards to mark the occasion. Let us hope she continues to resist Niall, he said, with a smile that some would call mild and pious. Even Niall's patience could not last forever. Eventually, he would have to hand her to justice.
Chapter 32. Summoned in haste. To Egwene, Rand's visit to Kyrian seemed like one of those Grand Illuminator's fireworks displays she had heard of but never seen, exploding all through the city. The echoes seemed to reverberate without end. She did not go near the palace again, of course, but wise ones that went every day to search for traps laid with Saidar told her what went on. Nobles stared at one another with slitted eyes, Tyran and Kyrianan alike. Berylane seemed to have gone into hiding, refusing to see anyone she did not have to. Ruark apparently took her to task for neglecting her duties with small effect. He appeared to be the only one unaffected in the whole palace. Even the servants jumped if you looked at them, though that might just have been having the wise ones themselves poking into every corner. In the tents, things were no better, among the wise ones anyway. The rest of the Aiel were like Ruark, calm and solid. Their attitude made the wise ones' moodiness even more tense by comparison, not that it needed any. Amis and Cerelia came back from meeting Rand all but hissing. They did not say why, not where Egwene could hear, but the feeling spread through the wise ones as fast as thought, until every one of them stalked about like a bristling cat, ready to claw anything that moved. Their apprentices stepped lightly and spoke softly, but still were scolded for what would have passed without notice before, and punished for what would have brought only a scolding. Shido wise ones appearing in the camp did not help. At least Therava and Emerys were wise ones. The third was Savannah herself, striding around self-importantly with her blouse unlaced enough to rival Berylane, no matter how the dust blew. Therava and Emerys said Savannah was a wise one, and though Cerelia grumbled, there was no choice but to accept her as one. Egwene was sure they were spying, but Amis nearly looked at her when she suggested it. Protected by custom, they had a free run of the tents, welcomed by all the wise ones, even Cerelia, as if close friends or first sisters. Still, their presence honed the edge of everyone's mood, especially Egwene's. That smirking cat Savannah knew who she was, and took no pains to hide her delight in sending the short apprentice girl to fetch a cup of water or the like at any opportunity. Savannah looked at her, too, a studying sort of gaze. It made Egwene think of someone studying a chicken, thinking how to cook it after they stole it. Worse than that, the wise ones would not tell her what they talked about. It was wise ones' business, and none of apprentices'. For whatever reason the Shido were there, the mood among the other wise ones certainly interested them. More than once Egwene saw Savannah, when she thought herself unobserved, smile as she watched Amis or Melinda or Cosane stalk by, talking to herself and needlessly adjusting her shawl. No one listened to Egwene, of course. Too many comments about the Shido women finally earned her most of the day spent digging a hole deep enough to stand in without being seen. And when she climbed out, all sweat and filth, to begin filling it in, Savannah was watching. 2 days after Rand left, Aeron and some other wise ones talked 3 maidens into sneaking over the wall of Arillin's palace in the night to see what they could scout out, and that made everything worse. The 3 avoided Gawyn's guards, if with more difficulty than they expected, but the Aes Sedai were another matter. While they were still climbing from the roof into an attic, they were wrapped up in the power and whisked inside. Fortunately, Coiron and the others seemed to think they were there to steal, though the maidens might not have thought it was so fortunate. They were tossed into the street, so bruised they could hardly walk, and still struggling not to sniffle when they got back to the tents. The other wise ones took turns upbraiding Aeron and her friends, usually in private, though Cerelia appeared to make a point of confronting them before as many people as possible. Savannah and her 2 companions sneered quite openly whenever they saw Aeron or one of the others, and speculated among themselves in very audible voices about what the Aes Sedai would do when they found out. Even Cerelia looked at them askance for that, but no one said anything, and Aeron and her friends began walking as small as the apprentices. The apprentices began trying to hide when not actually performing their duties or taking lessons. Sharp tempers became like razors. Except for her hole, Egwene managed to avoid the worst of it, but only because she stayed away from the tents a good deal, largely to stay clear of Savannah before she taught the woman a lesson. She had no doubt how that would end. Savannah was accepted as a wise one, no matter how many grimaces there might be when she was not around. Amis and Bear would probably let the Shido woman set her punishment. At least staying away was not too difficult. She might be an apprentice, but only Cerelia made any effort to teach her the 1,000 things a wise one had to know. Until Amis and Bear gave her final permission to return to Tel Riyadh, her days and nights were largely her own, so long as she managed to escape being snapped up with Saranda and the rest to wash dishes or gather dung for the fires, or the like. She could not understand why the days seemed to pass so slowly. She thought it must be waiting on Amis and Bear. Gawain was at the Long Man every morning. She became used to the fat innkeeper's suggestive smirks, though once or twice she did think of kicking the woman. Maybe 3 times, no more than that. Those hours went by in a flash. No sooner did she sit on his knee than it was time to straighten her hair and leave. Sitting on his knee no longer frightened her. Not that it had ever frightened her exactly, but it had come to be more than pleasant. If she sometimes thought things she should not have, if those thoughts made her blush, well, he always brushed her face with his fingers when she blushed, and said her name in a way she could have spent a lifetime hearing. He let slip less about what was going on with the Aes Sedai than she learned elsewhere, and she could hardly make herself care. It was the other hours that dragged out as though mired in mud. There was so little to do that she thought she might burst from frustration. Wise ones keeping watch on Arillan's mansion reported no more Aes Sedai. Chosen from those who could channel, the Watchers said the Aes Sedai were still wielding the power inside day and night without break. But Egwene did not dare go close, and if she had, she could not have told what they were doing without seeing the flows. Had the Wise Ones been less snappish, she might have tried to spend time reading in her tent. But the one time she touched a book except at night by lamplight, Bear muttered so about girls wasting their days lying about lazily that Egwene murmured that she had forgotten something and scurried out of the tent before she was found something more useful to do. A few moments' conversation with another apprentice could be as dangerous. Stopping to talk with Saranda, who was hiding in the shade cast by a tent belonging to some stone dogs, earned her an afternoon doing laundry when Cerelia found them. She might actually have been glad of chores just for something to do, but Cerelia examined the perfectly clean wash hung inside the tent to keep off the ever-present dust, sniffed, and told them to do it again. Twice she told them to do it again. Savannah watched part of that, too. Being in the city always made Egwene look over her shoulder, yet on the 3rd day she picked her way down to the docks, as cautiously as a mouse stealing from a cat. A wizened fellow with a narrow little boat scratched his thinning hair and demanded a silver mark to row her out to the sea folks' ship. Everything was dear, but that was ridiculous. She fixed him with a level stare, told him he could have a silver penny, still far too much, really, and hoped the bargaining would not take her whole purse. She did not have much. Everybody jumped and flinched at the Aiel, but when it came to bargaining, they forgot all about Kadinsor and spears and fought like lions. He opened his toothless mouth, closed it, peered at her, then muttered under his breath, and to her surprise, told her she was stealing the bread out of his mouth. "Get in," he grumbled. "Get in. I can't waste all day for a pittance. Browbeating a man, stealing the bread." He went on like that even after he began working the oars, pulling the tiny boat out onto the broad waters of the Alguenya. Egwene did not know whether Rand had met this wave mistress, but she hoped he had. According to Elaine, the Dragon Reborn was the sea folk Koramor, the chosen one, and all he had to do was appear to have them running at his beck and call. She hoped they did not grovel too much, though. Rand got more than enough of that already. Still, it was not Rand that sent her out with the muttering boatman. Elaine had actually met some of the Atha-an-Mier, had traveled on one of their ships, and she said sea folk windfinders could channel. Some of them anyway, maybe most. That was a secret the Atha-an-Mier held close, but the windfinder on Elaine's vessel had been more than willing to share her knowledge once her secret was penetrated. Sea folk windfinder knew weather. Elaine claimed they knew more of weather than the Aes Sedai. She said the wind finder on her ship had worked enormous flows to produce favorable winds. Egwene had no idea how much of that was true and how much enthusiasm, but learning a little about weather would certainly be better than twiddling her thumbs and wondering whether being caught by Nasuna might be a relief from the Wise Ones and Savannah. With what she knew now, she could not have made it rain if the skies were black except for lightning. At the moment, of course, the sun burned golden in a cloudless sky, and heat shimmers danced over the dark water. At least the dust did not make it far onto the river. When the boatman finally drew in his oars and let the small craft drift beside the ship, Egwene stood up, ignoring his mutters that she would have them both in the river. "Hello?" she called. "Hello? May I come aboard?" She had been on several riverboats and was proud that she knew the right terms. Ship folk seemed touchy about the right words, but this vessel was outside her experience. She had seen rivercraft longer, a few, but none so tall. Some of the crew were in the rigging or clambering up the slanted masts, dark, bare-chested men, barefoot in wide, colorful trousers held up by bright sashes, dark women in bright blouses as well. She was just at the point of shouting again, louder, when a rope ladder uncoiled down the side of the ship. No answering call came from the ship, yet that seemed invitation enough. Egwene climbed. It was difficult. Not the climb, but keeping her skirts decently close. She could see why the seafolk women wore trousers, but finally she reached the rail. Immediately her eyes fell on a woman not a span away on the deck. Her blouse and trousers were blue silk with a darker sash. She wore 3 worked gold earrings in each ear, and a fine chain that supported tiny, glittering medallions ran from one to a ring in her nose. Elaine had described this, and even demonstrated using Telairan, but seeing it in the flesh made Egwene wince. But there was something else. She could sense the ability to channel. She had found the wind finder. She opened her mouth, and a dark hand flashed in front of her eyes with a gleaming dagger. Before she could scream, the blade sliced through the ropes of the ladder. Still clinging to the useless thing, she plummeted. She did scream then, for all of a heartbeat, before she went into the river feet first, plunging deep. Water rushed into her open mouth, drowning her scream. She thought she swallowed half the river. Frantically, she struggled to unwrap her skirts from around her head and rid herself of the ladder. She was not in a panic. She was not. How far down had she gone? It was all muddy darkness around her. Which way was up? Iron bands gripped her chest, but she breathed out through her nose, watching the bubbles stream, as it seemed to her, down and to her left. Twisting, she stroked for the surface. How far? Lungs burning. Her head broke through into daylight, and she sucked in air with a coughing gasp. To her surprise, the boatman reached down and hauled her into his boat by increments, muttering at her to stop thrashing before she upset them, adding that sea folk were a touchy lot. He leaned over again to reclaim her shawl before it sank once more. She snatched it from him, and he shied back as if he thought she meant to hit him with it. Her skirts hung heavily, her blouse and shift clung, her headscarf slanted across her forehead. A pool began to form in the bottom of the boat under her feet. The boat had drifted maybe 20 paces from the ship. The wind finder was at the railing now, and 2 more women, one in plain green silk, the other brocaded red worked with gold thread. Their earrings and nose rings and chains caught the sun. "You are refused the gift of passage," the green-clad woman called, and the one in red shouted, "Tell the other disguises do not fool us. You do not frighten us. You are all refused the gift of passage." The wizened boatman picked up his oars, but Egwene pointed a finger straight at his narrow nose. "Stop right where you are." He stopped, dunking her. Not a word of common courtesy. Drawing a deep breath, she embraced Saidar and channeled 4 flows before the wind finder could react. So she knew weather, did she? Could she divide her flows 4 ways? Not many Aes Sedai could. One flow was spirit, a shield she shoved onto the windfinder to keep her from interfering, if she knew how. Each of the other three was air, woven almost delicately around each woman, binding her arms to her sides. Lifting them was not precisely difficult, but not easy either. A clamor rose on the ship as the women floated into the air and out over the river. Egwene heard the boatman moaning. She was not interested in him. The three seafolk women did not even kick. With an effort, she hoisted them higher, some 10 or 12 paces above the surface. No matter how hard she strained, that seemed to be the limit. Well, you don't want to actually hurt them, she thought, and released the weaves. They'll scream now. The seafolk women curled into balls as soon as they began to fall, spun, straightened with their arms thrust out before them. They entered the water with 3 quite small splashes. Moments later, 3 dark heads broke the surface, and the women began swimming rapidly back toward the ship. Egwene closed her mouth. If I haul them up by their ankles and dunk their heads, they'll... What was she thinking? They had to scream because she had? She was no wetter than they. I must look like a drowned rat. She channeled carefully. Working about yourself always took care. You could not see the flows clearly, and water rolled off her, oozed out of her garments. It made quite a puddle. It was the boatman staring at her, mouth hanging open and eyes wide, that made her realize what she had done. Channeled, in the middle of the river, with nothing to hide her from any Aes Sedai who happened to be where she could see. Sun or no sun, she suddenly felt cold to the bone. You may take me back to shore now. No telling who was on the docks. At this distance, she could not tell a man from a woman. Not to the city, the riverbank. The fellow flung himself against his oars so hard she almost fell over backward. He took her to a spot where the shore was all smooth rocks the size of her head. There was no one in sight, but she leaped out as soon as the boat grated onto the rocks, hoisted her skirts, and darted up the sloping bank at a dead run she maintained all the way back to her tent, where she collapsed in a panting pile of sweat. She did not go near the city again, except to meet Gawain, of course. The days passed, and the now almost ceaseless wind carried waves of dust and grit day and night. On the 5th night, Bear accompanied Egwene into the world of dreams, just a quick jaunt in the nature of a test, a walk in the part of Tel Rhiod that Bear knew best, the Aiel Waste, a parched, jagged land that made even drought-torn Cairhien seem lush and fair. A quick trip, and then Bear and Amis came to wake her and see whether it had had any ill effect. It had not. No matter how they made her run and jump, no matter how often they peered into her eyes and listened to her heart, they agreed. But agreement or not, the next night Amis took her for another short trip to the waste, followed by another examination that made her glad to crawl onto her pallet and fall into a deep sleep. Those 2 nights she did not return to the world of dreams, but it was more exhaustion than anything else. Before that, she had told herself every night she should stop. A fine thing if she was caught violating their strictures just when they were ready to lift them. But somehow she always decided that just a short trip would be all right, quick enough to reduce the chance of exposure. One thing she did avoid was the place between Tel Rhiod and the waking world, the place where dreams floated. Especially she avoided it after she found herself thinking that if she was very careful, she might be able to peek into Gawain's dreams without being drawn in, and that even if she was pulled in, it would only be a dream. She reminded herself firmly that she was a grown woman, not a silly girl. She was just glad no one else knew what a snarl the man made of her thoughts. Amis and Bear would laugh till they cried. On the 7th night, she prepared herself for bed carefully, putting on a fresh shift and brushing her hair till it shone. All useless so far as Tel Rhiod was concerned, but it kept her from thinking about how her stomach was doing backflips. Tonight it would be Aes Sedai waiting in the heart of the stone, not Nynaeve or Elaine. That should make no difference, unless... The ivory-backed hairbrush froze in mid-stroke. Unless one of the Aes Sedai revealed that she was only accepted. Why had she not thought of that before? Light, but she wished she could talk with Nynaeve and Elaine. Only she could not see what good it would do, and she was certain that dream of breaking things meant something would go badly wrong if she did speak to them. Chewing her lip, she considered going to Amis and telling her she was not feeling well. Nothing serious, just an upset stomach, but she did not think she could visit the dream tonight. They were going to start her lessons again after tonight's meeting, but another lie, and a coward's way to boot. She would not be a coward. Not everyone could be as brave as everyone else, but cowardice was despicable. Whatever happened tonight, she had to make herself face it, and that was that. Firmly, she put down the brush, blew out the lamp, and crawled onto her pallet. She was tired enough that falling asleep presented no problem, though if necessary she knew how to put herself to sleep at any time now, or enter a light trance where she could be in the world of dreams and still talk, well, mumble, to someone waiting by her body. The last thing before sleep came, she realized something surprising. Her stomach was not turning over anymore. She stood in a great vaulted chamber forested with thick columns of polished red stone, the heart of the stone in the stone of Tyr. Gilded lamps hung from chains overhead, unlit, but there was of course light, coming from everywhere and nowhere. Amis and Bear were already there, looking no different than they had that morning, except that all their necklaces and bracelets sparkled a bit more than even gold really should have. They were talking quietly and looking irritated. Egwene caught only a word here and there, but two of them were Randall Thor. Abruptly, she realized she was wearing an Accepted's white dress with the banded hem. As soon as she did, it became a copy of the Wise One's garb, without jewelry. She did not think the other two women had noticed, or would know what the dress meant if they did. There were times when surrender lost less G and earned less toe than the alternatives, but no Aiel would ever consider it without even trying to fight. "They are late again," Amis said wryly, walking out into the open space beneath the chamber's great dome. Driven into the floor stones there was what appeared to be a sword made of crystal, Kalandor of prophecy, a male sangreal, and one of the most powerful ever made. Rand had put it there to remind the Tyrants of him, as if there was any chance of them forgetting. But Amis barely glanced at it. To others, the sword that is not a sword might be a symbol of the dragon reborn. To her, it was a wetlander concern. "At least we can hope they will not try to pretend they know everything and we nothing. They were much better last time." Bear's snort would have made Cerelia blink. "They will never be better. The least they can do is be where they said they would be when they said that—" She cut off as 7 women appeared suddenly on the other side of Kalandor. Egwene recognized them, including the young woman with the determined blue eyes she had seen before in Tel Riyadh. Who was she? Amis and Bear had mentioned the others, usually in acid tones, but never another. She wore a blue-fringed shawl. They all wore their shawls. Their dresses changed color and cut from moment to moment, but the shawls never flickered. The Aes Sedai's eyes focused immediately on Egwene. The Wise Ones might as well not have existed. "Egwene Alvier," Shiriam said formally, "you are summoned before the hall of the tower." Her tilted green eyes shone with some suppressed emotion. Egwene's stomach sank. They knew she had been masquerading as a full sister. "Ask not why you are summoned," Carlinia said right behind Shiriam, her icy voice making the formality even harder. "It is yours to answer, not to question." For some reason, she had cut her dark hair short. That was the sort of unimportant detail that seemed to loom large in Egwene's mind. She certainly did not want to think about what this all meant. The ceremonious phrases rolled on in a stately rhythm. Amis and Bear adjusted their shawls and frowned, their irritation beginning to turn to concern. "Delay not in your coming." Egwene had always thought Anaya kindly, but the bluff-faced woman sounded as firm as Carlinia, and not all that much warmer in her formality. It is yours to obey in haste. The three spoke in unison. It is well to fear the summons of the hall. It is well to obey in haste and humility, unasking. You are summoned to kneel before the hall of the tower and accept their judgment. Egwene controlled her breathing, at least enough that she managed not to pant. What was the penalty for what she had done? Not light, she suspected. Not if all this ceremony went with it. They were all staring at her. She tried to read something on those Aes Sedai faces. 6 showed only ageless serenity, with maybe a hint of intensity in the eyes. The young blue had the cool calmness of one who had been Aes Sedai for years, but she could not hide a slight, satisfied smile. They seemed to be waiting for something. I will come as soon as I can, she said. Maybe her stomach was down in her ankles, but she could match them with her voice. No cowardice. She would be Aes Sedai, if they let her, after this. I don't know how quickly, though. It's a long way, and I do not know exactly where Salidar is, just somewhere along the River Eldar. Shiriam exchanged glances with the others. Her dress went from pale blue silk to dark gray with divided skirts. We are sure there is a way to make the journey quickly, if the Wise Ones will help. Swan is sure it will require no more than a day or two if you enter Tel Riyadh physically. No, Bear snapped. At the same instant, Amis said, We will not teach her such a thing. It was used for evil, it is evil, and whoever does it loses part of themselves. You cannot be sure of this, Baonin said patiently, since it seems none of you have ever done it. But if you know of it, you must have some notion of how it is done. We may be able to work out what you do not know. Patience was exactly the wrong tone. Ami settled her shawl and stood up even straighter than usual. Bear planted fists on hips with a glare that showed teeth. In a moment, there was going to be one of those eruptions the Wise Ones had hinted at. They were going to teach these Aes Sedai a few lessons about what could be done in Tel Riyadh, by way of showing them how little they knew. The Aes Sedai faced them quite calmly, full of confidence. Their shawls held steady, but their dresses flickered almost as fast as Egwene's heartbeat. Only the young blue's garb had any semblance of holding, changing just once during that long silence. She had to stop it. She had to go to Salidar, and it certainly would help nothing if she came as witness to the humiliation of these Aes Sedai. I know how. I think I do. I'm willing to try. If it did not work, she could always ride. But I still have to know where. Better than I do now, anyway. Amis and Bear turned their attention from the Aes Sedai to her. Not even Karlinya could have equaled those cold stares, or Morvrin. Egwene's heart sank after her stomach. Shiriam immediately began giving directions, so many miles west of this village, so many leagues south of that. But the young blue cleared her throat and said, This may be more help. The voice sounded familiar, but Egwene could not connect it to the face. Perhaps she had little better control of her clothing than the others. Soft green silk became deep blue as she spoke. A high embroidered neck became a lace ruff in the Tyran style, a cap of pearls appearing on her head. But she did know something of Tel Riyadh. Suddenly a large map hung in the air to one side, with a glowing red dot at one end labeled Kyrian in large letters, and another as Salidar at the other. The map began to expand and change. Suddenly the mountains were not just lines, but raised up. The forests took on shades of green and brown. The rivers glittered like blue water in sunlight. It grew until it made a wall hiding the entire side of the heart. It was like looking down on the world. Even the Wise Ones were impressed enough to ignore their disapproval, at least until the woman's Tyran gown turned to yellow silk with a silver embroidered neckline. The young woman was not interested in them, though. For some reason, she stared challengingly at the other Aes Sedai. That is splendid, Swan, Shiriam said after a moment. Egwene blinked. Swan? It must be a woman of the same name. This younger swan gave a self-satisfied sniff and a sharp nod, very reminiscent of Swan Sanche. But that was impossible. You're just trying to put it off, she told herself firmly. It's certainly enough for me to find Salidar, whether or not I can... She glanced at Amis and Bear, so full of silent disapproval they could have been carved of winter stone. Whether or not I can come here in the flesh. One way or another, I promise I will be in Salidar as soon as I can. The map vanished. Light! What are they going to do to me? Her mouth half formed the question, and Carlinia cut her off sharply, deep in the ceremony again and even harder than before. Ask not why you are summoned. It is yours to answer, not to question. Delay not in your coming, Anaya said. It is yours to obey in haste. The Aes Sedai exchanged glances and vanished so quickly, she half wondered whether they thought she would ask anyway. That left her alone with Amis and Bear, but when she turned to them, uncertain whether to begin with an explanation or an apology or just a plea for understanding, they vanished too, leaving her there alone, surrounded by the redstone columns, with Kalendor glittering beside her. There were no excuses in Ji'ito. Exhaling sadly, she stepped out of Tel Riod back to her sleeping body. She woke immediately. Waking when you wished was as much a part of a dreamwalker's training as going to sleep when you wished, and she had promised to go as quickly as she could. Channeling, she lit the lamps, all of them. She would need light. She made an effort to be brisk as she knelt beside one of the small chests that stood against the walls of the tent and began digging out clothes she had not worn since going to the waste. A part of her life was over, but she would not cry over the loss. She would not.
As soon as Egwene disappeared, Rand stepped out from among the columns. He came here sometimes to look at Kalendor. The first visit had been after Osmodian taught him to invert his weaves. Then he had changed the traps laid around the Sangreal, so only he could see them. If the prophecies could be believed, whoever drew it out would follow after him. He was not sure how much he did believe any longer, but there was no sense taking chances. Lews Therin rumbled somewhere in the back of his head. He always did when Rand came close to Kalendor. But tonight, the gleaming crystal sword interested Rand not at all. He stared at where the huge map had hung. Not really a map. There at the end, but something more. What was this place? Was it simple chance that drew him here tonight instead of yesterday or tomorrow? One of his Taviran tugs on the pattern? No matter. Egwene had accepted that summons meekly, and that she would never do if it came from the Tower and Elida. This Salidar was where her mysterious friends were hiding, where Elaine was. They had handed themselves to him. Laughing, he opened a gateway to the reflection of the palace in Camelin.
Chapter 33. Courage to Strengthen. Kneeling in just her shift, Egwene frowned at the dark green silk riding dress she had worn into the waist, which seemed a very long time ago. There was so much to do. She had given some time to writing a hasty note and rousing Cowinda from her blankets with instructions to leave it at the Long Man in the morning. It said little beyond the fact that she had to go away. She did not know much more, but she could not just disappear without telling Gawain. A few of the phrases made her blush to remember. Saying she loved him was one thing, but actually asking him to wait. Yet she had taken care of him as far as was possible. Now she had to ready herself, and she hardly knew for what. The tent flap was thrown back, and Amis entered, then Bear and Cerelia. They stood in a line looking down at her, three faces stern with disapproval. It was very hard not to clutch the dress to her breast. In her shift, she felt very much at a disadvantage. In armor, she would have been at a disadvantage, a matter of knowing she was in the wrong. She was surprised it had taken them so long to come. She took a deep breath. If you've come to punish me, I don't have time for carrying water or digging holes or any of it. I am sorry, but I said I would come as soon as I can, and I think they mean to count minutes. Amis's pale eyebrows rose in surprise, and a puzzled look passed between Cerelia and Bear. How should we punish you? Amis asked. You stopped being a pupil the moment your sisters summoned you. You must go to them as Aes Sedai. Egwene covered a wince by examining the riding dress again. It had gathered remarkably few wrinkles for having been rolled up in a chest all these months. She made herself face them again. I know you're angry with me, and you have cause. Angry, Cerelia said. We are not angry. I thought you knew us better. It was true she did not sound angry, yet censure still painted all their faces, including hers. Egwene stared from one to the other, especially Amis and Bear. But you told me how wrong you think what I'm going to do is. You said I must not even think about it. I said I wouldn't, and then I went ahead and worked out how to do it. Startlingly, a smile bloomed on Cerelia's leathery face. Her multitude of bracelets clattered as she shifted her shawl in a satisfied manner. You see? I told you she would understand. She could be Aiel. Some of the tightness faded from Amis, a little more from Bear, and Egwene understood. They were not angry that she meant to try entering Tel'aran'rhiod in the flesh. That was wrong in their eyes, but you had to do what you felt you had to do. And even if this worked, it incurred no obligation except to herself. Not angry at all, really. Not yet. What dug at them was her lie. Her stomach fluttered. The lie she had admitted. Maybe her smallest lie. Another deep breath was required to prime her throat for the words. I lied about other things, too. I entered Tel'aran'rhiod alone after I promised I would not. Amis's face darkened again. Cerelia, not a dream walker, only shook her head ruefully. I promised to obey as a pupil, but when you said the world of dreams was too dangerous after I was injured, I went anyway. Bear folded her arms, expressionless. Cerelia muttered something about foolish girls, but it hardly sounded heated. A third long breath. This would be the hardest to say. Her middle was not fluttering anymore. It danced so hard she was surprised she was not shaking. The worst of all is, I am not Aes Sedai. I'm only accepted. You might call me an apprentice. I will not be raised to Aes Sedai for years, if I ever am now. Cerelia's head came up at that, thin lips compressed in a hard line, but still none of them said anything. It was up to Egwene to make matters right. They could never be exactly as before, but... You've admitted everything, a small voice whispered. Now you'd better get on with finding out how fast you can reach Salidar. You can still be raised Aes Sedai one day, but not if you make them madder than they already are. Egwene lowered her eyes and stared at the colorful, layered carpets, her mouth twisting with scorn. Scorn for that small voice, and shame that it could speak in her head, that she could think it. She was going away, but before she did, she had to put matters right. It was possible, under Ji'ito. You did what you had to do, then paid the cost. Long months ago in the Waste, Avienda had showed her how a lie was paid for. Gathering every scrap of courage she could find, hoping it was enough, Egwene put the silk dress aside and stood. Strangely, beginning seemed to make going on easier. She still had to look up to meet their eyes, but she did it proudly, head high, and she did not have to force the words at all. I have toe. Her stomach was not fluttering any longer. I ask the favor that you will help me meet my toe. Salidar was going to have to wait.
Leaning on his elbow, Matt examined the game of snakes and foxes laid out on the tent floor. Occasionally a drop of sweat fell from his chin, just missing the board. It was not a board at all, really. Just a piece of red cloth with the web of lines drawn in black ink and arrows showing which lines allowed movement only one way and which both. 10 pale wooden discs, each with an inked triangle, were the foxes. 10 with a wavy line, the snakes. 2 lamps set to either side gave more than enough light. "We'll win this time, Matt," Oliver said excitedly. "I know we will." "Maybe," Matt said. Their 2 black-stained discs were nearly to the circle in the middle of the board, but the next roll of the dice would be for the snakes and foxes. Most of the time, you did not make it as far as the outer edge. "Roll the dice." He never touched the dice cup himself since the day he had given it to the boy. If they were going to play the game, it might as well be without his luck taking a hand. With a grin, Oliver rattled the leather cup and spilled out the wooden dice his father had made. He groaned as he counted the pips. This time, 3 dice showed faces marked with a triangle, the other 3 wavy lines. On their turn, you had to move the snakes and foxes toward your own pieces by the shortest path. And if one landed on the point you occupied, a snake touched Oliver, a fox Matt, and Matt could see if the rest of the pips had been played, 2 more snakes would have reached him. Only a child's game, and one you would not win so long as you followed the rules. Soon Oliver would be old enough to realize that, and like other children, stop playing. Only a child's game, but Matt did not like the fox getting him, and even less the snakes. It brought back bad memories, even if one had nothing to do with the other. "Well," Oliver muttered, "we almost won. Another game, Matt?" Not waiting for an answer, he made the sign that opened the game, a triangle, and then a wavy line through it, then chanted the words, "Courage to strengthen, fire to blind, music to dazzle, iron to bind." "Matt, why do we say that? There is no fire, no music, and no iron." "I don't know." The line tickled something in the back of his head, but he could not bring it up. The old memories from the Tirangrial might as well have been chosen at random. They probably had been. And there were all those gaps in his own, all those fuzzy places. The boy was always asking questions he did not know the answer to, usually beginning with why. Derrid ducked in out of the night and gave a start of surprise. Face shining with sweat, he still had his coat on, if hanging undone. His newest scar made a pink furrow across the white lines crisscrossing his face. "I think it's past your bedtime, Oliver," Matt said, pushing himself up. His wounds gave a few tinges, but only a few. They were healing just fine. "Put the board up." He stepped close to Derrid and lowered his voice to a whisper. "If you ever tell about this, I'll cut your throat." "Why?" Derrid asked dryly. "You are turning into a wonderful father. He shows a remarkable resemblance to you." He seemed to be struggling with a grin, but a moment later, it was gone. "The Lord Dragon is coming into camp," he said, as serious as death. Thoughts of punching Derrid in the nose vanished. Matt pushed the tent flap aside and ducked into the night in his shirt sleeves. 6 of Derrid's men, in a circle around the tent, stiffened when he appeared. Crossbowmen. Pikes certainly would not be much good for guards. It was night, but not dark in the camp. The bright glow of a waxing 3/4 moon in a cloudless sky was washed out by the light of fires spaced among the rows of tents and men sleeping on the ground. Sentries stood every 20 paces, all the way to the log palisade. Not the way Matt would have preferred it, but if an attack could pop out of the air. The land lay nearly flat here, so he had a clear view of Rand striding toward him. Not alone. 2 veiled Aiel moved on their toes, heads swiveling every time one of the band rolled over in his sleep or a sentry shifted his feet to watch them. That Aiel woman Avienda was with him as well, a bundle across her back, stalking along as if she would go for the throat of anyone who got in her way. Matt did not understand why Rand kept her around. Aiel women are nothing but trouble, he thought bleakly, and I've never seen a woman more set to give trouble than that one. "Is that really the Dragon Reborn?" Oliver asked breathlessly. Clutching the rolled-up game to his chest, he was almost bouncing. "It is," Matt told him. "Now get off to bed. This is no place for boys." Oliver went, muttering reproachfully, but only as far as the next tent. Out of the corner of his eye, Matt saw the boy dart out of sight. His face reappeared, peering around the corner. Matt left him alone, though after getting a good look at Rand's face, he wondered whether this was any place for grown men, let alone a boy. That face could have been used to hammer down a wall, but some emotion struggled to break through. Excitement or maybe eagerness. Rand's eyes held a fevered light. He had a wide piece of rolled parchment in one hand, while the other stroked his sword hilt unconsciously. The dragon belt buckle glittered in the firelight. Sometimes the head of one of the dragons peeking out from his coat sleeves did too. When he reached Matt, he wasted no time with greetings. I need to talk to you. Alone. I need you to do something. The night was a black oven, and Rand wore a gold-embroidered green coat with a high collar, but he was not sweating a drop. Derrid, Telmanus, and Elysian stood a few paces away in various states of undress, watching. Matt motioned them to wait, then nodded toward his tent. Following Rand in, he fingered the silver fox head through his shirt. He had nothing to worry about, at least. He hoped he did not. Rand had said alone, but apparently Avienda did not think that applied to her. She stayed a firm 2 paces from him, no more and no less. Mostly she watched Rand with an unreadable face, but now and then she glanced at Matt, frowning and eyeing him up and down. Rand paid her no attention, and for all his seeming haste before, he showed none now. He looked around the tent, though Matt wondered uneasily whether he was seeing it. There was not much to see. Oliver had set the lamps back on the small folding table. The chair folded too, and so did the washstand and the cot. All were black lacquered with lines of gilt. If a man had coin, you might as well spend it on something. The slits the Aiel had made in the tent had been mended neatly, but they still showed. The silence dug at Matt. What is this, Rand? I hope you haven't decided to change the plan at this late date. No answer, only a look as if Rand had just remembered he was there. It made Matt nervous. Whatever Derrid and the rest of the band thought, he worked hard at keeping clear of battles. Sometimes, though, being Taviran worked against his luck. That was the way he saw it. He believed Rand had something to do with that. He was more strongly Taviran. Strong enough that at times, Matt almost felt a pulling. When Rand put his finger in, Matt would not be surprised to find himself in the middle of a battle if he was asleep in a barn. A few more days and I'll be in Tyr. The ferries will take the band across the river, and a few days beyond that, we'll see us with Wyraman. It's too bloody late to go meddling. I want you to bring Elaine, too. To Caemlyn. Rand broke in. I want you to see her safe to Caemlyn, whatever happens. Don't leave her side until she's on the Lion Throne. Avienda cleared her throat. Yes, Rand said. For some reason, his voice went as cold and hard as his face. But then, did he need reasons if he was going mad? Avienda is going with you. I think it's best. You think it's best? She said indignantly. If I had not wakened when I did, I would never have known you had found her. You did not send me anywhere, Randall Thor. I must speak with Elaine for my own reasons. I am very glad you found Elaine, Matt said carefully. If he was Rand, he would leave the woman wherever she was. Light Avienda would be better. At least Aiel women did not walk around with their noses in the air or think you should jump just because they said so. Of course, some of their games were on the rough side, and they did have the habit of trying to kill you now and again. I just don't understand why you need me. Jump through one of your gateways, give her a kiss, scoop her up, and jump back. Avienda fastened an outraged stare on him. You would have thought he had advised kissing her. Rand unrolled the large parchment on the table, using the lamps to hold down the ends. This is where she is. It was a map, a stretch of the river Eldar, and maybe 50 miles or so to either side. An arrow had been drawn in blue ink, pointing into forest. Salidar was printed beside the arrow. Rand tapped near the eastern edge of the map. That was wooded too. Most of it was. There is a large clearing here. You can see the nearest village is nearly 20 miles north. I'll put a gateway through to the clearing for you and the band. Matt managed to turn a wince into a grin. Look, if it has to be me, why not just me? Make your gateway to this Saladar. I toss her on a horse and what? Was Rand going to make a gateway from Saladar to Camelin as well? It was a long ride from the Eldar to Camelin. A very long way, with only a snooty noblewoman and an Aiel for company. The band, Matt, Rand snapped. You and the whole band. He drew a long, shuddering breath, and his tone became milder. His face did not lose its rigidity, though, and his eyes were still feverish. Rand could almost believe he was sick, or in pain. There are Aes Sedai in Saladar, Matt. I don't know how many. Hundreds, I've heard. But I won't be surprised if it is closer to 50. The way they go on about the tower whole and pure, I doubt you'll see more. I mean to put you out 2 or 3 days away so they can learn you're coming. No point in startling them. They might think you were a White Cloak attack. They're rebels against Elida, and probably frightened enough that you won't have to do more than loom a little and say Elaine has to be crowned in Camelin to make them let her go. If you think they can be trusted, offer your protection. And mine. They're supposed to be on my side, and they might be glad of even my protection by now. Then you escort Elaine, and as many of the Aes Sedai as want to come, straight across Altara and Murundi to Camelin. Show my banners, announce what you're doing, and I don't think the Altarans or Mirandians will give much trouble. Not as long as you keep moving. If you find any dragon sworn along the way, gather them in as well. Most will probably turn to bandits if I don't tie a rope to them soon. I've heard a rumor or two already, but you will draw them, flying my banners. His sudden grin showed teeth, but never touched those hot eyes.
I don't care about...
How many birds with one stone, Matt? You ride through Altara and Murundi with 6,000 men and draw the dragon sworn out after you, and you may hand me both countries. There was so much in that to set Matt's teeth on edge that he no longer cared whether Rand had 10 sore teeth and both boots full of cockleburs. Make Aes Sedai think he meant to attack them? Indeed not. And he was supposed to intimidate 50 of them? Aes Sedai did not frighten him. Maybe not even 5 or 6 together. But 50? He touched the fox head through his shirt again before he realized it. He might just find out how lucky he really was. As for riding across Altara and Murundi, he could see it now. Every noble whose lands he crossed would swell up like a strutting rooster and try to peck him the moment his back was turned. If that Taviran madness came into it, he would probably find some lord or lady gathering an army right in front of him. He made one more try. Rand, don't you think this might draw Samael's eyes north? You want him looking east. That is why I'm here, remember? To make him look this way. Rand shook his head emphatically. All he'll see is a guard of honor escorting the Queen of Andor to Camelin. And that's if he learns of it before you reach Camelin. How quickly can you be ready? Matt opened his mouth, then gave it up. He was not going to budge the man. 2 hours. The band could be booted and in their saddles faster, but he was in no hurry, and the last thing he wanted was the band thinking they were moving on the attack. Good. I need an hour or so myself. For what, he did not say. Stay close to Elaine, Matt. Keep her safe. I mean, there's no point to this if she doesn't reach Camelin alive for her coronation. Did Rand think he did not know about him and Elaine, canoodling in every corner of the stone the last time they were together? I'll treat her like my own sister. His sisters had done their best to make his life miserable. Well, he expected the same from Elaine, just in a different way. Maybe Avienda would be a little better. She won't get out of my sight until I plunk her down in the royal palace. And if she tries Mistress Snoodon with me too often, I'll bloody well kick her. Rand nodded. That reminds me, Bertawin is in Camelin, with Varen and Alana, and some more Two Rivers girls. They're on their way to train for Aes Sedai. I'm not sure where they will do it. I'm certainly not letting them go to the tower the way things are. Maybe the Aes Sedai you bring back will take care of it.
He's not.
Matt gaped. His sister, Aes Sedai,
The
Bode,
moon.
he used to run tell their mother every time he did anything that was fun.
That once.
Another thing, Rand went on.
But one
Egwene may be in Saladar before you. I think somehow they found out she's been calling herself Aes Sedai.
And they drank the sun.
Do what you can to get her out of it. Tell her I will get her back to the Wise Ones as soon as I can. She'll probably be more than ready to go with you.
It is not.
Maybe not, though. You know how stubborn she's always been. The main thing is Elaine. Remember, don't leave her side till she reaches Camelin. I promise, Matt muttered. How under the light could Egwene be somewhere on the Eldar? He was sure she had been in Kyrian when he left Mehron. Unless she had worked out Rand's trick with the gateways. In which case, she could jump back any time she wished. Or jump to Camelin and make a gateway for him and the band at the same time. Don't worry about Egwene either. I'll drag her out of whatever trouble she's in, no matter how muley she behaves. It would not be the first time he had pulled her chestnuts off the hearth before they burned. Very likely he would get no thanks for it this time either. Bode was going to be Aes Sedai? Blood and bloody ashes. Good, Rand said. Good. But he was staring intently at the map. He jerked his eyes away, and for an instant, Matt thought he intended to say something to Avienda. Instead, he turned away from her roughly. Tom Marilyn should be with Elaine. Rand produced a letter from his pocket, folded and sealed. See that he gets this. Shoving the letter into Matt's hands, he hurriedly left the tent. Avienda took a step after him, half raising a hand, lips parted to speak. Just as suddenly, her mouth snapped shut, and she buried her hands in her skirts and squeezed her eyes shut. So the wind came that way, did it? And she wants to talk to Elaine. How did Rand ever get himself in this pickle? Rand was always the one who knew how to handle women, Rand and Perrin. Still, it was no concern of his. He turned the letter over in his hands. Tom's name was written in a feminine hand. The seal was one he did not recognize. A spreading tree topped by a crown. What noblewoman would be writing to a leathery old man like Tom? Not his concern either. Tossing the letter on the table, he picked up his pipe and pouch. Oliver, he said, stuffing the bowl with tobacco. Ask Talmanis, Nalisian, and Darrett to come to me. There was a squeak just outside the door flap, then, yes, Matt, and the sound of scurrying feet. Avienda looked at him, folding her arms with a firm expression. He forestalled her. So long as you travel with the band, you are under my command. I want no trouble, and I expect you to see there isn't any. Should she start anything, he would deliver her to Elaine, tied in a pack saddle, if it took 10 men to put her there. I know how to follow, battle leader. She punctuated that with a sharp sniff. But you should know that not all women are Wetlanders soft. If you try putting a woman on a horse when she does not want to go, she may put a knife in your ribs. Matt nearly dropped the pipe. He knew Aes Sedai could not read minds. If they could, his hide would have been hanging on a wall in the White Tower long since. But maybe Aiel Wise Ones? Of course not. It's just one of those tricks women pull. He could figure out how she did it if he put his mind to it. He just did not care to put his mind to it. Clearing his throat, he stuck the unlit pipe between his teeth and bent to study the map. The band could probably cover the distance from the clearing to Saladar in a day if he pushed, even in that wooded terrain. But he intended to take 2 or even 3. Give the Aes Sedai plenty of warning. He did not want them any more frightened than they already were. A frightened Aes Sedai was almost a contradiction. Even wearing the medallion, he was not eager to learn what a frightened Aes Sedai might do. He felt Avienda's eyes in the back of his neck, heard a rasping sound. Sitting cross-legged against the tent wall, she was drawing her belt knife along a honing stone and watching him. When Elysian entered with Darrett and Telmanis, he greeted them with, "We are going to tickle some Aes Sedai under the chin, rescue a mule, and put our snip-nosed girl on the lion throne.
Bran's life.
Oh yes, that's Avienda.
Is now.
Don't look at her crosswise, or she'll try to cut your throat, and probably slit her own by mistake." The woman laughed as if he had made the funniest joke in the world. She did not stop sharpening her knife, though.
For a moment, Egwene could not understand why the pain had stopped increasing. Then she pushed herself up from the carpets of her tent and stood, sobbing so hard she quivered. She wanted very much to blow her nose. She did not know how long she'd been crying that hard. She only knew she felt on fire from the top of her hips to the backs of her knees. Standing still was a problem she barely mastered. The shift she had thought of as scant protection had been discarded some time back. Tears rolled down her face, and she stood there and bawled. Cerelia and Amis and Bear regarded her soberly, and they were not the only ones, though most of the rest were sitting about on cushions or stretched out, talking and enjoying tea served by a slender Gaishine. A woman thanked the light. They were all women, wise ones and apprentices, women Egwene had told she was Aes Sedai. She was grateful that just letting them think she was did not count. She could not have survived that. It was the telling, the spoken lie, but there had been surprises. Kosane, a lean, yellow-haired, spine-ridged Miagoma, had said gruffly that Egwene had no toe toward her, but she would stay for the tea, and so had a stare. Aeron, on the other hand, seemed to want to cut her in two, and Surunda... Trying to blink away the haze of tears, Egwene glanced toward Surunda. She was sitting with three wise ones, chatting and occasionally looking in Egwene's direction. Surunda had been absolutely merciless. Not that any of them had gone easy. The belt Egwene had found in one of her chests was thin and supple, but twice as wide as her hand, and these women all had strong arms. A half-dozen or so strokes from each added up. Egwene had never felt so ashamed in her life. Not that she was naked and red-faced and weeping like a baby. Well, the weeping was part. Not even that they had all watched her strapped when not taking their own turns. What shamed her was that she had taken it so badly. An Aiel child would have been more stoic. Well, a child would never have had to face it, but the principle was the simple truth. "Is it over?" Was that thick, unsteady voice really hers? How these women would laugh if they knew how carefully she had gathered her courage. "Only you know the worth of your honor," Amis said flatly. She held the belt dangling at her side, using the wide buckle as a handle. The murmur of conversation had ceased. Egwene drew a long, shaking breath through her sobs. All she had to do was say it was done, and it was. She could have said enough after one blow from each woman. She could... Wincing, she knelt and stretched herself out on the carpets. Her hands went beneath Bear's skirts to grasp the woman's bony ankles through her soft boots. This time she would hold on to her courage. This time she would not cry out. This time she would not kick or thrash about or... The belt had not hit her yet. Raising her head, she blinked her eyes clear to glare at them. "What are you waiting for?" Her voice still shook, but there was more than a note of anger, too. "Making her wait on top of everything else? I have a journey to make tonight, in case you've forgotten. Get on with it." Amis tossed the belt down beside Egwene's head. "This woman has no toe toward me. This woman has no toe toward me." That was Bear's thin voice. "This woman has no toe toward me," Cerelia said forcefully. Bending, she smoothed damp hair from Egwene's face. "I knew you were Aiel in your heart. Do not be overproud now, girl. You have met your toe. Get up before we think you are boasting." Then they were helping her to her feet, hugging her and wiping away her tears, holding a handkerchief for her to finally blow her nose. The other women gathered around, each announcing that this woman had no toe toward her, before adding her own hugs and smiles. It was the smiles that were the biggest shock. Surunda beamed at her as brightly as ever. But of course, toe did not exist once it was met. Whatever earned it might as well never have happened. A bit of Egwene that was not wrapped up in Ji'ito thought that maybe what she had said at the end helped too, as well as getting back down in the first place. Perhaps she had not faced it with the indifference of an Aiel in the beginning, but at the end Cerelia was right. She had been Aiel in her heart. She thought a part of her heart always would be Aiel. The wise ones and apprentices left slowly. Apparently they should remain the rest of the night or longer, all laughing and talking with Egwene, but that was just custom, not Ji'ito. And with Cerilia's help she managed to convince them that she just did not have the time. At last it was only her, Cerelia, and the two dreamwalkers. All the hugs and smiles had slowed her tears to a trickle, and if her lips still trembled no matter what she did, she could still smile. In truth, she wanted to cry again, if for a different reason. Partly for a different reason. She was on fire. I'm going to miss all of you so much. Nonsense. Cerelia snorted for emphasis. If you have luck, they will tell you you can never be Aes Sedai now. Then you can return to us. You will be my apprentice. In 3 or 4 years, you will have your own hold. I even know the husband for you, my great daughter Amarin's youngest great son, Tarek. He will be a clan chief one day, I think, so you must watch for a sister wife to be his roof mistress. Thank you, Egwene laughed. It seemed she had something to fall back on if the hall in Salidar did send her away. And Amis and I will meet you in Tel Riod, Bear said, and tell you what we know of events here and with Randall Thor. You will go your own way in the world of dreams now, but if you wish it, I will still teach you. I do wish it. If the hall let her anywhere near Tel Riod. But then they could not keep her out. Whatever they did, they could not do that. Please keep a close eye on Rand and the Aes Sedai. I don't know what he is playing, but I'm sure it is more dangerous than he thinks. Amis said nothing about more teaching, of course. She had given her word on a course of action, and even meeting Toh did not erase that. Instead, she said, I know Ruark will regret not being here tonight. He has gone north to look at the Shido for himself. Do not be afraid your Toh toward him must go unmet. He will give you the opportunity when you meet once more. Egwene gaped, and covered by blowing her nose for what seemed the 10th time. She had forgotten all about Ruark. Of course, nothing said she had to pay her obligation to him in the same way. Maybe her heart was at least partly Aiel, but for a moment her mind sought frantically for another method. There had to be one, and she would have plenty of time to find it before seeing him again. I will be very grateful, she said faintly. And there was Mylane, too, and Avienda. Light. She had thought she was done with it. Her feet kept shifting no matter how hard she tried to hold still. There had to be another way. Bear opened her mouth, but Cerelia cut her off. We must let her clothe herself. She has a journey to begin. Bear's thin neck stiffened, and Amis's mouth turned down. Clearly, neither liked what Egwene was going to try any more than before. Maybe they meant to stay and try talking her out of it, but Cerelia began muttering only half under her breath about fools who tried to stop a woman from doing what she thought she had to do. The younger pair straightened their shawls. Bear had to be 70 or 80, but she certainly still was younger than Cerelia, gave Egwene a farewell hug, and left with murmurs of, May you always find water and shade. Cerelia waited only a moment longer. Think on Tarek. I should have asked him to the sweat tent so you could see him. Until you can, remember this. We are always more afraid than we wish to be, but we can always be braver than we expect. Hold on to your heart, and the Aes Sedai cannot harm what is really you, your heart. They are not nearly so far above us as we believed. May you always find water and shade, Egwene, and always remember your heart. Alone, Egwene merely stood for a time, staring at nothing and thinking. Her heart. Perhaps she did have more courage than she thought. She had done what she had to here. She had been Aiel. In Salidar, she was going to need that. Aes Sedai methods differed from the wise ones in some respects, but they would not go easy if they knew she had called herself Aes Sedai. If they knew. She could not imagine why else they would summon her so coldly, but Aiel did not surrender before battle was joined. With a start, she came to herself. If I'm not going to surrender before fighting, she thought wryly, I might as well get on to the battle. Chapter 34. Journey to Salidar. Egwene washed her face.
Hey, Fire,
Twice.
how you doing?
Then she found her saddlebags and
Ozzy.
filled them. Her ivory comb and brush and mirror went in, and her sewing box, a small, finely gilded casket that likely had held some lady's jewels once, plus a white cake of rose-perfumed soap and clean stockings and shifts and handkerchiefs and a host of things, until the leather sides bulged, and she could hardly buckle the flaps down.
Ozzy.
Several dresses and cloaks, an Aiel shawl remained to make a bundle, which she tied neatly with a cord. That done, she looked around for anything else she might want to take. It was all hers. Even the tent had been given to her, but that was certainly too bulky, as were the carpets and cushions. Her crystal wash basin was beautiful and far too heavy.
Hell yeah.
The same for
Hot
the
tea
chests,
sounds good.
though several had beautiful work on the
Especially
strapping
here, 'cause
and lovely
it's,
carving. Only then, thinking about
It's
the
been
chests
pretty
of
much
all
a
things,
chill day
did she
today.
realize she was trying to put off the hardest part of
A
getting
little
ready.
cloudy and raining here and
Courage,
there.
she said dryly.
Let's see what we're
Heart
at.
of an Aiel. It turned out to be quite possible to put on stockings without sitting down, so long as you did not mind hopping around. Stout shoes followed, good if she had to walk far, and a silk shift, white and soft.
No, not too bad.
Then
We're at
the dark green
71.
riding dress with its narrow divided skirts. Unfortunately, that fit quite snugly over the hips, enough to remind her unnecessarily that she would not enjoy sitting for a while. There was no point going outside. Bear and Amis were probably in their own tents, but she had no intention of risking the chance one of them might see her do this. It would be like slapping them. If it worked, that was. If not, she had a very long ride ahead of her. Nervously rubbing her fingers over her palms, she embraced Saidar, letting it fill her, and shifted her feet. Saidar made you more aware of everything, including your own
Hasn't
body,
been too bad.
which she would just as soon have missed right then.
Come on.
Trying something new, something no one had ever tried before that she knew, should have been done slowly and carefully, but for once she wanted to be rid of the source. She channeled briskly, flows of spirit, woven just so.
There's Luna.
The air shimmered in the middle of the tent along her weave, cloaking the other side in mistiness. If she was right,
There we go.
she had just created a place where the interior of her tent was so similar to its reflection in Tel Ayran Riod that there was no difference at all right there. One was the other. But there was only one way to be sure. Tossing the saddlebags over her shoulder, she took the bundle under one arm and stepped
Go
through the
down there now.
weave, then let go of Saidar. She was in Tel Ayran Riod. All it took to tell her was that the lamps that had been lit were no longer burning, yet there was a sort of light.
You better
Things
go outside
moved
to do that,
slightly
boy.
between one glance and the next. The wash basin, a chest. She was in Tel Ayran Riod in the flesh. It felt no different than when she came in a dream. She ducked outside. A three-quarter moon
Ozzy.
shone down on tents where no fire burned and no one moved, on a Kyrian that seemed oddly distant and clouded in shadow. All that remained was the problem of actually getting to Salidar.
yeah.
She had thought about that. A great deal depended on whether she had as much control in the flesh as when she was part of the world of dreams. Fixing in her mind what she would find, she walked around the tent and smiled. There stood Bella, the short, shaggy mare she had ridden out of the Two Rivers a lifetime ago. Only a dream Bella, but the stout mare tossed her nose and whickered at sight of her. Egwene dropped her burdens and flung her arms around the horse's head. "I'm glad to see you again, too," she whispered. That dark, liquid eye looking at her was Bella's, reflection or no. Bella wore the high-cantled saddle she had imagined, too. Comfortable for long travel normally, but not soft. Egwene eyed the thing askance, wondering how it would look padded. Then she had a thought. You could change anything in Tel Ayran Riod if you knew how, even yourself. If she had enough control to make Bella while in the flesh, she concentrated on herself. With a smile, she fastened the saddlebags and bundle behind the saddle and climbed up herself, settling quite comfortably. "It isn't cheating," she told the mayor. "They would not expect me to ride all the way to Salidar like that." Well, come to think of it, maybe they would. Even so, Aiel Heart or no Aiel Heart, there were limits. Turning Bella, she healed the mare's ribs gently. "I need to be as quick as I can, so you will need to run like the wind." Before she had time to chuckle at the image that came to mind of plump Bella running like the wind, the mare was doing so. The landscape blurred, streaking by. For a moment, Egwene clung to the pommel of the saddle, her mouth hanging open. It was as if Bella's every trotting step carried them miles. With the first, she had an instant to realize they were on the riverbank below the city, with ships floating out on the dark waters amid streaks of moonlight. And even as she tried to jerk at the reins to stop Bella running headlong into the river, another step took them into thicketed hills. Egwene threw back her head and laughed. This was marvelous. Except for the blurring, there was little real sensation of speed. Her hair hardly had time to stream back in the wind of that rush before it was gone, only to come again a moment later. Bella's gait felt the same plodding trot she recalled, but the sudden leap of everything around her was exhilarating. One moment a village street, moon dark and silent. The next a country road winding through hills. The next a meadow with hay standing almost to Bella's shoulders. Egwene only paused now and again to orient herself. No trouble at all with that marvelous map in her head, the one the woman with Swan's name had made, and otherwise let Bella trot. Villages and towns appeared and vanished in a blur. Great cities, one she thought sure was Camelin, walls silvery white in the night. And once in forested hills, the head and shoulders of a huge statue rearing out of the earth, a remnant of some land lost in history, appearing so suddenly at Bella's side with a withered grimace that Egwene nearly screamed, only it was gone before she could. The moon did not move at all between leaps, and hardly any as they sped along. A day or two to reach Salidar? That was what Shiriam had said. The wise ones were right. Everyone had believed for so long that Aes Sedai knew everything that Aes Sedai believed it too. She was going to prove them wrong tonight. But it was not likely they would take any real notice of her proof. They knew. After a time, when she was sure she was somewhere well into Altara, she began letting Bella make smaller jumps, reining her in more often, even riding normally for a bit, especially if there was a village nearby. Sometimes a night-shrouded inn had a sign that named the village the Morella Inn, or the Ionan Spring Inn, and moonlight added to the odd sense of light in Tel Riyadh made reading them easy. Bit by bit, she became absolutely certain where she was in relation to Salidar, and began to take still smaller leaps. Then none at all, only letting Bella trot normally through forest where tall trees had killed most of the undergrowth and drought most of the rest. Still, she was surprised when a considerable village appeared suddenly, silent and dark in the moonlight. It had to be the right place, though. At the edge of the thatch-roofed stone houses, she dismounted and took down her belongings. It was late, but people might still be about in the waking world. No need to startle them by popping out of the air. If an Aes Sedai saw that and mistook what she was, she might have no chance to face the hall. "You did run like the wind," she murmured, hugging Bella a last time. "I wish I could take you with me." A useless fancy, of course. What was made in Tel Riyadh could exist only there. This was not really Bella, after all. Even so, she felt a twinge of regret as she turned her back. She would not stop imagining Bella, let her exist as long as she could, and wove her shimmering curtain of spirit. Head high, she stepped through, ready to face whatever came with her Aiel heart. One step she took, and came up short with a sharp, wide-eyed, "Oh!" The changes she had made in Tel Riyadh existed in the real world no more than Bella did. The flames returned with a rush, and with them, it was almost as though Cerelia spoke to her. "If you take what you did to meet your Toe, and make it so it might as well never have happened, how have you met Toe? Remember your Aiel heart, girl." Yes, she would remember. She was here to do battle whether the Aes Sedai knew it or not. ready to fight for the right to be Aes Sedai, ready to face light. What? There were people in the streets, a few moving between houses where lighted windows made golden pools. Walking a little gingerly, Egwene approached a wiry woman with a white apron and a harried expression. "Excuse me, my name is Egwene Alvear. I am accepted." The woman gave her riding dress a sharp look. "And I've just arrived. Can you direct me to Shiriam Sedai? I need to find her." Very likely Shiriam was asleep already, but if she was, Egwene intended to wake her. She'd been told to come as soon as possible, and Shiriam was going to know she was here. "Everyone comes to me," the woman muttered. "Does anybody do anything for themselves? No, they want Nildra to do it. You accepted are the worst of the lot. Well, I don't have all night. Follow me if you're coming. If not, you can find her for yourself." Nildra strode off without so much as a backward glance. Egwene followed silently. If she opened her mouth, she was afraid she would tell the woman what she thought, and that would hardly be the way to start her stay in Selidar, however short it might be. She wished her Aiel heart and her Two Rivers head could get together. The distance was not long, up the hard-packed dirt street a little way and around the corner into another, narrower street. Sounds of laughter came from some of the houses. Nildra stopped at one that was silent, though light shone in the windows of the front room. Pausing just long enough to knock on the door, she went in before there was any answer. Her curtsy was perfectly proper, if quick, and she spoke in a somewhat more respectful tone than before. "Aes Sedai, this girl says her name is Egwene, and she got out no more." They were all there, the 7 from the Heart of the Stone, not a one looking ready for bed, though all but the young woman with Swan's name wore robes. From the way their chairs were pulled together, it seemed that Egwene had walked in on a discussion. Shiriam was the first to leap from her chair, waving Nildra out. "Like child, already?" No one paid any mind at all to Nildra's curtsy, or her put-upon sniff on going. "We never expected," Anaya said, taking Egwene's arms with a warm smile. "Not so soon. Welcome, child. Welcome." "Were there any ill effects?" Morvran demanded. She had not risen, and neither had Carlinia or the young Aes Sedai, but Morvran leaned forward intently. All the others' robes were silk of various hues, sometimes brocaded or embroidered. Hers was plain brown wool, though it did look soft and finely woven. "Do you feel any changes from the experience? We had precious little to go on. Frankly, I am surprised it worked." "We shall have to see it work to know how well it does." Bayanin paused for a sip of tea, then set cup and saucer down on a rickety-legged side table. The cup and saucer did not match, but then none of the furniture matched, and most looked as lopsided as the small table. "If there are ill effects, she can be healed, and they will be done with." Egwene stepped away from Anaya quickly, setting her belongings beside the door. "No, I'm quite well. Really, I am." She could have hesitated. Anaya might well have healed her without asking. That would have been cheating, though. "She appears healthy enough," Carlinia said coolly. Her hair really was short, dark curls barely covering her ears. It had not been just something she did in Tel Ayran Riod. She wore white, of course. Even the embroidery was white. "We can have one of the yellows check her thoroughly later to be sure if need be." "Let her get her feet on the ground," Mirella said with a laugh. Lush flowers in yellow and red so covered her robe that hardly any green showed. "She's just come 1,000 leagues in a night, in hours." "You've no time to let her find her feet," the young Aes Sedai put in firmly. She truly looked out of place in that gathering, in her yellow dress with the skirt slashed with blue, and the deep round neckline blue embroidered. That, and being the only one it was possible to put an age to. Come morning, the hall will swarm around her. If she's not ready, Romanda will gut her like a fat carp. Egwene gaped. That voice registered more than the words. You're Swan Sanche. No, it's impossible. Oh, it is possible, all right, Anaya said dryly, giving the young woman a long-suffering look. Swan is Aes Sedai again. Mirella's look was more exasperated than long-suffering. It had to be true. They had said so, but Egwene could hardly credit it, even when Shiriam explained. Nynaeve had healed stilling? Being stilled was why Swan looked no older than Nynaeve? Swan had always been a leather-faced taskmistress, and leather-hearted as well, not this pretty, creamy-cheeked woman with an almost delicate mouth. Egwene watched Swan while Shiriam talked. Those blue eyes were the same, though. How could she have seen that gaze, strong enough to drive nails, and not known? Well, the face was answer enough there. But Swan had always been strong in the power, too. When a girl first began, it required testing to tell how strong she would be, but not once she had gained that strength. Egwene knew enough now to weigh another woman in moments. Shiriam was clearly the strongest woman in the room aside from Egwene herself, and Mirella next, though it was hard to be certain. The rest all seemed close, except for Swan. She was weakest by a fair margin. This truly is Nynaeve's most remarkable discovery, Mirella said. The Yellows are taking what she has done and making their own marvels, but she began it. Sit down, child. It is too long a story to hear standing. I prefer to stand, thank you. Egwene eyed the straight-backed chair with a wooden seat that Mirella indicated, and barely repressed a shudder. What about Elaine? Is she all right, too? I want to hear all about her and Nynaeve both.
Yeah, chair's
Nynaeve's
fine.
most remarkable discovery? That implied more than one. It seemed she had fallen behind with the wise ones. She was going to have to run hard to catch up. At least she thought now that she would be allowed to. They would hardly have greeted her so warmly if she was going to be sent away in disgrace. She had not curtsied or called anyone Aes Sedai once, more because she had had no chance than for any other reason. Defiance was no way to face Aes Sedai, yet no one had called her down. Maybe they did not know after all. But then, why? Except for a little trouble she and Nynaeve have with pots at the moment,
It's okay, guys.
Shiriam began, but Swan broke in harshly. Why are you all jabbering like brainless girls? It's too late to be afraid of going on. It has begun. You began it. Either you finish, or Romanda will hang the lot of you in the sun to dry right alongside this girl, and Delena and Facella and the rest of the hall will be there with her to stretch you out. Shiriam and Mirella turned to face her almost together. All the Aes Sedai did, Morvrin and Carlinia twisting in their chairs. Cold Aes Sedai eyes stared from cold Aes Sedai faces. At first, Swan met those stares with a challenging stare of her own, as Aes Sedai as they, if seemingly much younger. Then her head fell a little, and spots of color entered her cheeks. She rose from the chair, eyes down. I spoke in haste, she muttered softly. Those eyes did not change. Maybe the Aes Sedai failed to notice, but Egwene saw. Yet that was still not like Swan. Egwene also saw that she did not know what was going on here at all. Not just Swan Sanche meek as milk, if she was pushed to it anyway. That least of all. What had they begun? Why would she be hung out to dry if they stopped? The Aes Sedai exchanged looks as unreadable as Aes Sedai could make them. Morvrin was the first to nod. You have been summoned for a very special reason, Egwene, Shiriam said solemnly. Egwene's heart began to beat faster.
Yeah,
They did
going
not
out
know about
somewhere,
her.
I can hear.
They did not. But what? You, Shiriam said, are to be the next Amerlin seat. Chapter 35. In the Hall of the Sitters. Egwene stared at Shiriam, wondering whether she was supposed to laugh. Maybe in her time with the Aiel she had forgotten what passed for humor among Aes Sedai. Shiriam stared back with that ageless, imperturbable face, tilted green eyes not seeming to blink. Egwene looked at the others. 7 faces with no expression, just an air of waiting. Swan might have been smiling faintly, but the smile could as easily have been the natural curve of her lips. Wavering lamplight made their features suddenly strange and inhuman. Egwene's head felt light, her knees weak. Without thinking, she let herself thump down in the straight-backed chair. She stood right up again, too. That certainly cleared her mind. A little, anyway. "I am not even Aes Sedai," she said breathlessly. That seemed non-committal enough. It had to be some sort of joke, or something. "That can be gotten around," Shiriam said firmly, jerking the bow of her pale blue sash tighter for emphasis. Bayonin's honey-colored braids swayed as she nodded. "The Amerlin seat, she is Aes Sedai. The law is quite clear. Several places it is stated, the Amerlin seat as Aes Sedai. But nowhere is it said that it is necessary to be Aes Sedai to become Amerlin. Any Aes Sedai would be familiar with Tower law, but as mediators, Greys had to know the law of every land, and Bayonin took on a lecturing tone, as though explaining something that none knew as well as she. The law that sets forth how the Amerlin is to be chosen, it merely says, the woman who is summoned, or she who stands before the hall, or the like. From beginning to end, the words Aes Sedai are mentioned not once. Never. Some might say that the intent of the framers it must be considered, but it is clear, whatever the intent of the women who wrote the law, that..." She frowned as Carlinia cut her off. "No doubt they thought it was understood to such a degree that there was no need to state it. Logically, however, a law means what it says, whatever the framers thought they meant. Laws seldom have much concern with logic," Bayonin said acidly. "In this case, however," she conceded after a moment, "you are quite correct." To Egwene, she added, "And the hall, they see it so also." They were all serious, even Anaya when she said, "You will be Aes Sedai, child, just as soon as you are raised Amerlin's seat. That is the long and short of it." Even Swan, despite that tiny smile, it was a smile. "You can take the 3 oaths as soon as we are back in the tower," Shiriam told her. "We considered having you speak them anyway, but without the oath rod it might be taken for a sham. Best to wait." Egwene almost sat down again before catching herself. Maybe the wise ones had been right. Maybe traveling through Tel Aranriod in the flesh had done something to her mind. "This is madness," she protested. "I can't be Amerlin. I'm... Objections piled up on her tongue in a tangle that let nothing out. She was too young. Swan herself had been the youngest Amerlin ever, and she was 30 when raised. She had barely begun her training, no matter what she knew about the world of dreams. Amerlins were knowledgeable and experienced, and wise. They were certainly supposed to be wise. All she felt was confounded and muddled. Most women spent 10 years as a novice and 10 as accepted. True, some moved faster, even much faster. Swan had. But she herself had been a novice less than a year, and accepted an even shorter time. "It's impossible," was the best she could manage, finally. Morvrin's snort reminded her of Cerelia. "Settle yourself down, child, or I'll see to it myself. This is no time for you to grow fluttery or start fainting on us." "But I wouldn't know what to do. Not the first thing." Egwene drew a deep breath. It did not really calm her racing heart, but it helped. A little. Aiel heart. Whatever they did, she would not let them bully her. Eyeing Morvrin's bluff, hard face, she added, "She can skin me, but she can't bully me. This is ridiculous is what it is. I won't paint myself for a fool in front of everybody, and that is what I'd be doing. If this is why the hall summoned me, I'll tell them no." "I fear that is not an option," Anaya sighed, smoothing her robe, a surprisingly frilly thing in rose silk, with delicate ivory lace bordering every edge. "You cannot refuse a summons to become Amerlin any more than you could a summons for trial. The words of the summons are even the same. That was heartening. Oh, yes, it was. The choice is the hall's now. Mirella sounded a touch sad, which did nothing for Egwene's spirits. Suddenly smiling, Shiriam put an arm around Egwene's shoulders. Do not worry, child. We will help you and guide you. That is why we are here. Egwene said nothing. She could think of nothing to say. Maybe obeying the law was not being bullied, but it felt much the same. They took silence for assent, and she supposed it was. Without delay, Swan was sent off, grumbling at being handed the task to wake the sitters personally and let them know Egwene had arrived. The house became a whirlwind before Swan made it out the door. Egwene's riding dress came in for considerable discussion, none of which she was part of, and a plump serving woman was roused from her nap in a chair in a back room and sent off with dire warnings if she breathed a word to fetch every accepted dress she could find that might come close to fitting Egwene. She had tried on 8 right there in the front room before finding one that did fit after a fashion. It was too tight in the bosom, but thankfully loose in the hips. All the time the serving woman was bringing in dresses and Egwene was trying them on, Shiriam and the others took turns running out to dress themselves, and in between lectured her on what was going to happen, what she had to do and say. They made her repeat everything back. The wise ones thought saying something once was sufficient, and woe to the apprentice who failed to listen and hear. Egwene remembered some of what she had to say from a novice lecture in the tower, and she got it word perfect the first time. But the Aes Sedai went over everything again and again, and then again. Egwene could not understand. With anyone else but Aes Sedai, she would have said they were nervous, calm faces or no. She began to wonder whether she was making some mistake, and started emphasizing different words. Say them as you were told, Carlinia snapped like a cracking icicle. And Mirella, sounding hardly less cold, said, You cannot afford a mistake, child. Not one. They put her through it 5 more times, and when she protested that she had given back every word correctly, listed who would stand where and who would say what just the way they had told her, she thought Morvrin might box her ears if Beonin or Carlinia did not first. In the event, their frowns were as hard as slaps, and Shiriam looked at her as if she were a novice being sulky. Egwene sighed and began yet again. I enter with 3 of you escorting me. It was a silent procession that made its way through the nearly empty, moon-shadowed streets. Few of the scattered people still out so much as glanced at them. 6 Aes Sedai with 1 lone accepted in their midst might or might not be a common sight here, but apparently it was not odd enough to occasion comment. Windows that had been lit were dark now. Quiet lay on the town, so their footsteps sounded distinctly on the hard dirt. Egwene fingered the great serpent ring, firmly back in place on her left hand. Her knees were trembling. She had been prepared to face anything, but her list of anything had never included this. In front of a rectangular 3-story stone building, they stopped. The windows were all dark, but by moonlight it had the look of an inn. Carlinia, Beonin, and Anaya were to remain here, and the first 2 at least were not much pleased. They made no comment, as they had not back at the house, but they adjusted their skirts unnecessarily and held their heads stiffly erect, not looking at Egwene. Anaya stroked Egwene's hair soothingly. It will go well, child. She carried a bundle under her arm, the dress Egwene would put on after everything was over. You are a quick study. Inside the stone building, a gong sounded deeply. Once, twice, a 3rd time. Egwene very nearly jumped. Silence for the space of a heartbeat, then the gong repeated its brazen song. Mirella smoothed her dress unconsciously. Once more silence, followed by the triple call. Shiriam opened the door, and Egwene followed her in with Mirella and Morvrin on her heels. The way they surrounded her, Egwene could not help thinking, was like guards set to make sure she did not run away. The large, high-ceilinged room inside was not dark, far from it. Lamps lined the mantels of 4 wide stone fireplaces, and more lined the stairs leading to the next floor and the railed walkway overlooking the room. A tall branched stand lamp, mirrored to increase the light, stood in each corner of the room. Blankets tacked over the window kept all that light in. 9 chairs made a row down either side of the room, facing inward in groups of 3. The women in them, the sitters for the 6 Ajahs represented in Salidar, wore their shawls and dresses in the colors of their Ajahs. Their heads swiveled toward Egwene, faces showing nothing but cool serenity. At the far end of the room was another chair standing on a small dais more like a flat box. A tall, heavy chair, the legs and uprights carved in spirals. It had been painted dark yellow in imitation of gilt. A stole lay across the arms, striped with 7 colors. It seemed miles from where Egwene stood to that stole. "Who comes before the hall of the tower?" Romanda demanded in a high, clear voice. She sat just below the golden chair, opposite the 3 blue sisters. Shiriam stepped smoothly aside, revealing Egwene. "One who comes obediently, in the light," Egwene said. Her voice should have been shaking. Surely they were not really going to do this. "Who comes before the hall of the tower?" Romanda demanded again. "One who comes humbly in the light." Any moment this would turn into her trial for pretending to be Aes Sedai. No, not that. They would just have shielded her and locked her away until time, if that was the case. But surely... "Who comes before the hall of the tower?" "One who comes at the summons of the hall, obedient and humble in the light, asking only to accept the will of the hall." Among the grays below Romanda, a dark, slender woman stood. As the youngest sitter, Kwamesa spoke the ritual question that dated to the breaking of the world. "Are there any present save women?" Romanda flung back her shawl deliberately and left it over the back of her chair as she stood. As eldest, she would answer first. Just as deliberately, she unfastened her dress and pushed it down to her waist along with her shift. "I am a woman," she pronounced. Carefully, Kwamesa laid her own shawl across her chair and stripped to the waist. "I am a woman," she said. The others rose then and began baring themselves, each announcing, once she was showing proof, that she was a woman. Egwene struggled a little with the snug bodiced acceptance dress that had been found for her, and had to have Mirelda's help with the buttons, but quickly they 4 were as bare as anyone else. "I am a woman," Egwene said with the others. Kwamesa walked slowly around the room, pausing before each woman for an almost insultingly direct stare, then halted in front of her own chair again and announced that there were none present but women. The Aes Sedai sat and most began pulling up their bodices. Not in haste exactly, but few wasting any time either. Egwene almost shook her head. She could not cover until later in the ceremony. Long ago, Kwamesa's question would have required more proof. In those days, formal ceremonies were held clad in the light, which was to say in nothing but your own skin. What would these women make of an Aiel sweat tent, or a Shinaran bath? There was no time for thought. "Who stands for this woman?" Romanda said, "and pledges for her, heart for heart, soul for soul, life for life?" She sat erect and supremely dignified, her plump bosom remaining bare. "I so pledge," Shiriam said firmly, followed a moment later by the strong voices of Morvrin and Mirella in turn. "Come forward, Egwene Alvir," Romanda commanded sharply. Egwene walked forward 3 paces and knelt. She felt numb. "Why are you here, Egwene Alvir?" She really was numb. She could not feel anything. She could not remember her responses either, but somehow they rolled from her tongue. "I was summoned by the hall of the tower." "What do you seek, Egwene Alvir?" "To serve the White Tower, nothing more and nothing less." Light, they were going to do it. "How would you serve, Egwene Alvir?" "With my heart and my soul and my life in the light, without fear or favor in the light." "Where would you serve, Egwene Alvir?" Egwene breathed deeply. She could still stop this idiocy. She could not possibly be up to actually. "In the Amerlin seat, if it pleases the hall of the tower." Her breath froze. Too late for turning back now. Maybe it had been too late in the heart of the stone. Delana was the first to stand, then Kwamesa and Janya, more, until 9 sitters stood before their chairs, signifying acceptance. Romanda was still firmly in her seat. 9 of 18. The acceptance had to be unanimous. The hall always sought consensus. In the end, all votes were unanimous, though it could take a great deal of talking to make it so. But there would be no talking aside from the ceremonial phrases tonight, and this was one short of outright rejection. Shiriam and the others had ridiculed her suggestion that that might happen, and did so quickly that she might have worried if the whole thing was not so ridiculous. But they had warned her almost in passing that this could occur. Not a rejection, but a statement that the sitters who remained in their chairs did not mean to be lapdogs. Only a gesture, a token, according to Shiriam. But looking at Romanda's stern face and Lilaine's, scarcely less so above her bare chest, Egwene was not certain of that at all. They had said it might be as many as 3 or 4, too. Without a word, the standing women retook their places. No one spoke, but Egwene knew what to do. Her numbness had vanished. Rising, she moved toward the nearest sitter, a sharp-faced green named Samalin who had stayed in her chair. As Egwene went to her knees again in front of Samalin, Shiriam knelt beside her, a wide basin of water in her hands. Ripples danced on the surface of the water. Shiriam appeared cool and dry, while Egwene was beginning to glisten with sweat, but Shiriam's hands were trembling. Morvran knelt and handed Egwene a cloth, Mirella waiting at her side with lengths of toweling over her arm. Mirella looked angry for some reason. "Please allow me to serve," Egwene said. Looking straight ahead, Samalin raised her skirts to her knees. Her feet were bare. Egwene washed each foot and patted it dry, then moved to the next green, a slightly plump woman named Malind. Shiriam and the others had given her all the sitters' names. "Please allow me to serve." Malind had a pretty face with full lips and dark eyes that looked as if they liked to smile, but she was not smiling now. She was one of those who had stood, but her feet were bare, too. Every sitter's feet were, all the way around the room. As Egwene washed all those feet, she wondered whether the sitters had known how many would remain sitting. Plainly, they had known some would, that this service would be required. She knew little more of how the hall of the tower worked than had been in that novice lecture. For all practical purposes, she knew nothing. All she could do was go on. She washed and dried the last foot. It belonged to Janya, who was frowning as if thinking of something else entirely. At least she had stood. And dropping the cloth in the wash basin, returned to her place at the foot of the rose and knelt. "Please allow me to serve." One more chance. Once again, Delana was first to rise, but Samalin was right behind her this time. No one sprang to her feet, yet one by one they stood, until only Lelaine and Romanda remained sitting, looking at each other, not Egwene. Finally, Lelaine gave the ghost of a shrug, pulled up her bodice unhurriedly, and rose. Romanda turned her head and looked at Egwene. She stared so long that Egwene became conscious of the sweat running down between her breasts and along her ribs. At last, in stately slowness, Romanda reclothed herself and joined the others. Egwene heard a gasp of relief from behind her, where Shiriam and the others were waiting. It was not over, of course. Romanda and Lelaine came together to lead her up to the yellow-painted chair. She stood before it while they pulled up her bodice and draped the stole of the Amerlin's seat around her shoulders, while they and all the sitters said, "You are raised to the Amerlin seat, in the glory of the light, that the White Tower may endure forever. Egwene Alvir, the Keeper of the Seals, the Flame of Tarvalon, the Amerlin seat." Lelaine removed Egwene's great serpent ring from her left hand and gave it to Romanda, who slipped it onto Egwene's right. "May the light illumine the Amerlin seat and the White Tower." Egwene laughed. Romanda blinked. Lelaine gave a start, and they were not the only ones. "I just remembered something," she said, then added, "Daughters." That was what the Amerlin called Aes Sedai. What she had remembered was what came next. She could not help thinking it was payment for easing her way through Telairan Murad. Egwene Alvear, keeper of the seals, the flame of Tarvalin, the Amerlin seat, managed to sit in that hard wooden chair without letting herself down gingerly and without wincing. She considered both triumphs of will. Shiriam and Mirella and Morvran glided forward. Whoever had gasped, there was no telling now by their serene faces, and the sitters formed a line behind them, stretching toward the door. It was done in order of age, with Romanda at the very end. Shiriam spread her skirts in a deep curtsy. "Please allow me to serve, Mother." "You may serve the tower, daughter," Egwene replied, as gravely as she could. Shiriam kissed her ring and stepped aside as Mirella made her curtsy. Down the line it went. There were some surprises in the arrangements. None of the sitters were really young, despite their Aes Sedai faces, but pale-haired Delana, whom Egwene had thought must be nearly as old as Romanda, stood less than halfway down the line, while Lelaine and Janya, both quite pretty women without a touch of gray in their dark hair, both came just ahead of the white-haired Yellow. Each made her curtsy and kissed Egwene's ring with absolutely no expression, though some did glance at Egwene's banded hem, and left the room by a rear door without another word. Normally there would have been more, but the rest of the ceremony was to wait on morning. At last Egwene was alone with the three women who had pledged for her. She was still not sure what that meant. Mirella went to let in the other three as Egwene stood. What would have happened if Romanda hadn't stood? Supposedly, there would have been one more chance, one more round of foot washing and asking to be allowed to serve. But she was sure that if Romanda had voted no the second time, she would have the third. Then she very probably would have been raised Amerlin herself in a few days, Shiriam replied. Her or Lelaine. That wasn't what I meant, Egwene said. What would have happened to me? Would I just have gone back to being accepted? Anaya and the others came hurrying up, smiling, and Mirella began helping Egwene out of the banded white dress and into a pale green silk that she would wear only long enough to reach her bed. It was late, but the Amerlin could not walk about in the dress of an accepted. Very probably, Morvran answered after a moment. I can't say whether that would be luck or not, being an accepted that every sitter knew had almost had the Amerlin seat. It has seldom happened, Bayonin said. But a woman refused the Amerlin seat is usually exiled. The hall strives for harmony, and she could not help being a source of disharmony. Shiriam looked straight into Egwene's eyes as if to impress her words.
I got to dabs right
We
now.
surely would have been exiled. Mirella and Morvran and I for certain, since we stood pledge for you, and likely Carlinia and Bayonin and Anaya as well. Her smile was abrupt. But it did not happen that way. The new Amerlin is supposed to spend her first night in contemplation and prayer, but once Mirella finishes with those buttons, it might be best if we gave at least a little of it to telling you how matters stand in Salidar. They were all looking at her. Mirella was behind her, doing up the last button, but she could feel the woman's eyes. Yes. Yes, I think that might be best. Chapter 36. The Amerlin is raised. Egwene raised her head from the pillows and looked around, for a moment surprised to find herself in a canopied bed in a loud room. Early morning light spilled in at the windows, and a plumply pretty woman in a simple gray wool dress was setting a large white pitcher of hot water on the washstand. Chesa had been introduced to her last night as her maid, the Amerlin's maid. A covered tray already sat beside her comb and brush on a narrow table beneath a mirror with a silver-worked frame. The smell of hot bread and stewed pears drifted in the air. Anaya had prepared the room for Egwene's arrival. The furnishings still did not match, but they were the best Salidar had to offer, from the padded armchair upholstered in green silk, to the stand mirror in the corner, with all its gilding intact, to the ornately carved wardrobe where her belongings now hung. Unfortunately, Anaya's taste seemed to run heavily to frothy lace and frills. Both thickly bordered the canopy of the bed and the drawn-back bed curtains, and one or the other decked the table and its stool, the arms and legs of the padded chair, the coverlet Egwene had tossed on the floor, and the thin silk sheet that had followed. The curtains of the windows were lace, too. Egwene put her head back down. Lace edged the pillows as well. The room made her feel she might drown in lace. There had been a great deal of talk after Shiriam and the others brought her fuel to what they called the Little Tower, almost all of it on their side. They were not really interested in what she thought Rand was up to, or what Coiron and the others might want. There was an embassy on its way to Camelin under Marana, who knew what to do, though they were rather vague about exactly what that was. For the most part, they did the talking, she the listening, her questions brushed aside. The answers to some were unimportant, she was told, for now anyway. Those that were answered got a quick gloss before they went on to what was important. Embassies had been sent off to every ruler, each one named in turn, with an explanation of why he or she was absolutely vital to Salidar's cause, which it seemed everyone was. They did not quite say everything would fail if even one ruler went against them, but the emphasis they laid on every one said it for them. Gareth Bryn was building an army that would eventually be strong enough to prosecute her claims against Elida, if it came to that. They did not seem to think it would, despite Elida's demand that they return to the tower. They seemed to believe that once word of Egwene Alvir's elevation to the Amerlin seat was spread, Aes Sedai would come to her, even some of those in the tower now, enough that Elida would have no choice but to step down on demand. The White Cloaks were twiddling their thumbs for some reason, so Salidar was as safe as anywhere for as long as was necessary. That Loghain had been healed as well as Swan and Lyanna. Of course she would have been healed if she was here. It was just a surprise to find out she was. Came up almost in passing. Nothing to worry you there, Shiriam said soothingly. She stood over Egwene, who sat in the padded armchair with the others in an arc around her. The hall will argue whether to gentle him again until old age relieves us of the problem. Egwene tried to stifle another yawn. It was getting late, and Anaya said, "We need to let her sleep. Tomorrow is almost as important as tonight was, child." Abruptly, she laughed to herself softly. "Mother. Tomorrow is important too, Mother. We will send Chesa to help you get ready for bed." Even after they left, going to bed was not easy. While Chesa was still undoing Egwene's dress, Ramonda appeared with a number of suggestions for the Amerlin, delivered in a firm, no-nonsense voice, and no sooner did she go than Lelaine came, as if the Blue Sitter had been waiting for the Yellow's departure. Lelaine had her own helpful counsel, given with Egwene sitting up in bed after Chesa was gently but firmly put out of the room. It was not a bit like Ramonda's advice. Neither was much like Shiriam's, and came with a warm, even affectionate smile, but with just as much certainty that Egwene would need a little guidance in her first months. Neither woman exactly said that she could guide Egwene to what was best for the tower better than Shiriam, or that Shiriam and her little circle might try to tug in too many directions, or that they might give bad advice, but the strong implications were there. Ramonda and Lelaine also each hinted that the other might have her own agenda, one that undoubtedly would cause untold misery. By the time Egwene channeled the last lamp out, she expected a sleep full of nightmares. In fact, there were only two that she remembered the next morning. In one, she was Amerlin, Aes Sedai, but without taking the oaths, and everything she did led to disaster. That wakened her bolt upright just to get away, yet she was sure it was not a dream with meaning. It was much the same as one of her experiences inside the ter'angreal, where she'd been tested for accepted. As far as anyone knew, those had no connection to reality. Not to this reality. The other was the sort of foolishness she expected. She knew enough about her own dreams now to know that, even if she had to wake herself finally to escape that one as well. Shiriam had snatched the stole from her shoulders, and then everyone was laughing at her and pointing at the fool who really believed a girl of barely 18 years could be Amerlin. Not just the Aes Sedai, but all the wise ones, and Rand, and Perrin, and Matt, Nynaeve and Elaine, almost everyone she had ever met, while she stood there naked, desperately trying to put on an acceptance dress that might have fit a 10-year-old child. Now, you can't be lying in bed all day, Mother. Egwene opened her eyes. Chesa had an expression of mock severity on her face and a twinkle in her eye. At least twice Egwene's age, at their first meeting, she had fallen straight into the blend of respect and familiarity that could be expected of an old retainer. The Amerlin seat can't be lying slug abed, not today of all days. The last thing in my mind. Scrambling stiffly from the bed, Egwene stretched before pulling off her sweaty shift. She could not wait until she had worked long enough with the power to stop sweating. I'll wear the blue silk with the white morning stars along the neckline. She noticed Chesa very carefully not looking as the woman handed her a fresh shift. The effects of meeting her toe had faded somewhat, but she still appeared faintly bruised. I had an accident before I got here, she said, hurriedly thrusting her head through the new shift. Chesa nodded in sudden understanding. Horses are wicked, untrustworthy beasts. You'll never get me on one, Mother. A good, sturdy cart is ever so much safer. If I fell off a horse like that, I'd never let on to a soul. Nildra would say, and Kaelin. Oh, you'd never believe the things some women can say the minute the back is turned. Of course, it's different to the Amerlin seat, but that's what I'd do. Holding the wardrobe door open, she glanced sideways at Egwene to see whether she understood. Egwene smiled at her. People are people. Low or high, she said gravely. Chesa beamed for an instant before bringing out the blue dress. Miriam might have chosen her, but she was the Amerlin seat's maid, and her loyalty was to the Amerlin seat. And she was right about today's importance, too. Eating quickly, despite Chesa's murmurs to herself about how gulping food always upset the stomach, the warm milk with honey and spices was sovereign for settling a nervous stomach. Egwene scrubbed her teeth and washed hurriedly, let Chesa take a few licks at her hair with the brush, and dressed as fast as the woman could get the blue silk over her head. Settling the seven-striped stole on her shoulders, she paused to look in the stand mirror. Stole or no stole, she did not look very much like the Amerlin seat. But I am. This is no dream. In the large room below, the tables stood as empty as they had in the night. Only the sitters were there, wearing their shawls and clustered according to Adja, and Shiriam standing alone. They quieted as Egwene descended the stair, curtsied when she reached the bottom. Ramonda and Lelaine eyed her sharply, then turned away, very obviously not looking at Shiriam, and resumed their conversations. When Egwene remained silent, the others did the same. Occasionally, one of them glanced at her. Even in whispers, their voices sounded too loud. There was silence outside, utter stillness. Egwene plucked her handkerchief from her sleeve and patted her face. None of them sweated a drop. Shiriam came to stand beside her. "It will go well," she said softly. "Just remember what you are to say." That was another thing they had gone over in detail last night. Egwene had a speech to deliver this morning. Egwene nodded. It was strange. Her stomach should have been turning over, her knees shaking. They were not, and she could not understand. "There is no need to be anxious," Shiriam said. She sounded as if she thought Egwene was and meant to soothe her, but before she could open her mouth again, Ramonda spoke loudly. "It is time." In a rustle of skirts, the sitters lined up according to age, with Ramonda in the lead this time, and marched outside. Egwene moved to just short of the door. Still no flutters. Maybe Chesa was right about the warm milk. Silence still. Then Ramonda's voice, too loud for nature. "We have an Amerlin seat." Egwene stepped outside into a heat she would not have expected until later in the day. As her foot left the stoop, it landed on a platform woven of air. The lines of sitters stretched out to either side of her, each sitter glowing with the light of Sidar. "Egwene Alvir," Ramonda intoned, her voice carried by weaves of the power. "The Watcher of the Seals, the Flame of Tar Valon, the Amerlin seat." They lifted her high as Ramonda spoke. raising the Amerlin in truth until she stood just below the thatched roof, standing on thin air, it would seem, to any but a woman who could channel. There were plenty to see her outlined by the rising sun. A second weave made the light into a shimmering weave around her. Men and women packed the street. The crowd disappeared around corners. Every doorway was filled, every window, every rooftop except that of the little tower itself. A roar erupted that very nearly drowned out Romanda. Waves of cheering that rolled across the village. Egwene scanned the crowd, searching for Nynaeve and Elaine, but she could not find them in that sea of upturned faces. An age seemed to pass before there was quiet enough for her to speak. The weave that had carried Romanda's voice shifted to her. They had prepared her speech, Shiriam and the others, a weighty exhortation she might have been able to deliver without blushing if she was twice her age, or better yet, 3 times. She had made a few changes on her own. We are gathered together in a quest for truth and justice that will not end until the false Amerlin Elida is removed from the place she usurped. The only change in that was will not for cannot, but she thought it stronger and better. As Amerlin, I will lead you in that quest, and I will not falter, as I know you will not. And that was quite enough exhortation. In any case, she had no intention of remaining up here long enough to repeat everything they wanted said. It all amounted to what she already had said anyway. As my keeper of the chronicles, I name Shiriam Bayanar. That produced a much smaller cheer. A keeper was not an Amerlin after all. Egwene glanced down, waiting until she saw Shiriam hurry outside, still draping her shoulders with the stole of the keeper, blue to show she had been raised from the blue Aja. It had been decided not to make a copy of the Amerlin's staff, topped with a golden flame, that the keeper carried, until the true staff was recovered from the White Tower. They would have to do without. Shiriam had been expecting a much longer wait, and she looked at Egwene with open exasperation. In the lines of sitters, Romanda and Lilane wore no expression at all. Each had had her own very strong suggestion for keeper, and needless to say, neither had been Shiriam. Egwene drew breath and turned back to the waiting crowd. In honor of this day, I hereby decree that all accepted and novices are absolved of penances and punishments. That was customary, and produced shouts of glee only from white-clad girls and a few accepted who forgot themselves. In honor of this day, I hereby decree that Theodrin Dabe, Feolain Oranda, Nynaeve Almira, and Elaine Trakand are from this moment raised to the shawl, full sisters and Aes Sedai. A sort of questioning silence greeted that, with here and there a murmur. It was not according to custom at all, far from it. But it was said, and a good thing Morvern had happened to mention Theodrin and Feolain. Time to return to what they had written out for her. I hereby decree this a day of feasting and celebration. Let no work be done but what is necessary for enjoyment. May the light shine on you all, and the Creator's hand shelter you. That last was swallowed by a tumultuous roar that overwhelmed the weave carrying her words. Some people began dancing in the street right there and then, though there was hardly room for them to move. The platform of air descended perhaps a trifle more quickly than it had risen. The sitters were staring at her when she stepped off, and the glow of Saidar began winking out among them almost before she touched ground. Shiriam darted up to take Egwene's arm, smiling at the stone-faced sitters. I must show the Amerlin her study. Forgive me. Egwene would not exactly have said Shiriam hustled her inside, but then again she would not exactly have said she did not. She did not think Shiriam would actually try to drag her, but it seemed best to gather her skirts with her free hand and take longer strides so as not to find out. Her study at the back of the waiting room turned out to be somewhat smaller than her bedroom, with 2 windows, a writing table, a straight-backed chair behind it, and 2 more in front. Nothing else. The beetle-ridden wall panels had been waxed to a dull shine, but the tabletop was quite bare. There was a piece of flowered carpet on the floor. Forgive me if I was abrupt, Mother, Shiriam said, releasing her arm. But I thought we should speak privately before you spoke to any of the sitters. They all had a hand in writing your speech, and I know I made a few changes, Egwene said with a bright smile. But I felt such a mudgeon standing up there with all that to say. All of them had a hand? No wonder it had sounded like a pompous old woman who could not stop talking. She almost laughed. Anyway, I said what had to be said, the heart of it. Elida must be removed, and I will lead them to do it. Yes, Shiriam said slowly. But there might be a few questions about some of the other changes. Theodrin and Phaelane will certainly be raised Aes Sedai as soon as we have the Tower and the Oath Rod back, and very likely Elaine. But Nynaeve still can't light a candle unless she yanks her braid at people first. That was exactly the point I wished to raise, Ramonda said, coming in without knocking. Mother, she added, after a distinct pause. Lelaine shut the door behind them, nearly in the faces of several other sitters. It seemed necessary, Egwene said, widening her eyes. I thought of it last night. I've been raised Aes Sedai without being tested or taking the 3 oaths, and if I was the only one, it would just point me out. With 4 others, I won't seem quite so odd anymore. Not to people here, at least. Elida might try to make something of it when she hears, but most folk know so little about Aes Sedai they won't know what to believe anyway. It is the people here who matter most. They must have confidence in me. Anyone but Aes Sedai would have gaped at her. As it was, Ramonda very nearly spluttered. That may be so, Lelaine began sharply, giving her blue-fringed shawl a jerk, then stopped. It was so. More, the Amerlin seat had publicly decreed those women Aes Sedai. The Hall might be able to keep them accepted, or whatever Theodrin and Phaelane were in their cases, but the Hall could not erase memories, and it would not stop everyone knowing they had gone against the Amerlin on her first day. A great deal that would do for confidence. I hope, Mother, Ramonda said in a tight voice, that you will consult the Hall first the next time. Going against custom can have unexpected consequences. Going against law can have unfortunate ones, Lelaine said bluntly, tacking on a belated mother. That was nonsense, or close to it. The conditions for being raised Aes Sedai were set in law, true, but the Amerlin could decree almost anything she wished. Still, a wise Amerlin did not jump into fights with the Hall when they could be avoided. Oh, I will consult in the future, Egwene told them earnestly. But it did seem the right thing to do. Please, would you excuse me now? I really do need to speak with the Keeper. They practically quivered. Their curtsies were slight, their parting words perfectly correct so far as the words went, but muttered in Ramonda's case, and in Lelaine's sharp enough to cut. You handled that very well, Shiriam said when they were gone. She sounded surprised. But you must remember the Hall can make problems for any Amerlin. One reason I am your keeper is so that I can advise you and keep you away from that sort of problem. You should ask me about any decrees you want to make, and if I'm not at hand, Mirella and Morvrin and the others. We are here to help you, Mother. I understand, Shiriam. I promise to listen carefully to whatever you say. I'd like to see Nynaeve and Elaine if that is possible. It should be, Shiriam said, smiling, though I may have to pull Nynaeve away from a yellow physically. Swan is coming to teach you about the etiquette of being Amerlin. There is a great deal of it to learn, but I'll tell her to come a little later. Egwene stared at the door after Shiriam had gone. Then she turned and stared at the table. Absolutely bare. Not a report to be read. No records to study. Not so much as a pen and ink to write a note, much less a decree. And Swan coming to teach her etiquette. When a timid tap came at the door, she was still standing there. Come, she said, wondering whether it was Swan or perhaps a servant with a snack of honey cakes, already cut into suitably small pieces. Nynaeve poked her head in hesitantly, then was pushed into the room by Elaine. Side by side, they made perfect deep curtsies, spreading white banded skirts wide and murmuring, "Mother." "Please don't do that," Egwene said. Actually, it was more of a wail. "You're the only two friends I have, and if you start..." Light, she was almost ready to cry. Elaine reached her first by a hair, throwing her arms around her. Nynaeve was silent, fiddling nervously with a slim silver bracelet, but not Elaine. "We're still your friends, Egwene, but you are the Amelin seat. Light, remember I told you one day you'd be the Amelin when I was..." Elaine grimaced faintly. "Well, in any case, you are. We can't just walk up to the Amelin and say, 'Egwene, does this dress make me look fat?' It would not be proper." "Yes, it would," Egwene said stoutly. "Well, in private," she allowed after a moment. "When we're alone, I want you to tell me a dress makes me look fat, or whatever you want." Smiling at Nynaeve, she tugged the woman's thick braid gently. Nynaeve gave a start. "And I want you to pull that at me if you feel like it. I need somebody who is Egwene's friend and doesn't see this bloody stole all the time, or I will go crazy. Speaking of dresses, why are you still in those? I thought sure you could be changed by now." Nynaeve did pull at her braid then. "That Nisao told me it must be some sort of mistake and dragged me off. She said she wasn't going to waste her turn just for a celebration." The sounds of it were beginning to rise outside, a general hum just loud enough to penetrate the stone walls, and a faint thread of music. "Well, it was no mistake," Egwene said. "Nisao's turn?" Well, she was not going to ask now. Nynaeve was not happy about it, and Egwene wanted this to be as happy an occasion as it could. Dragging the chair from behind the table, she saw two plump patchwork cushions on the seat and smiled. "Chesa, we are going to sit here and talk, and then I will help you find the two best dresses in Salidar. Tell me about these discoveries of yours." Anaya mentioned them, and Shiriam, but I could not make them hold still long enough to give me any details. Almost as one, the pair paused in the act of sitting and exchanging glances. Unaccountably, they seemed reluctant to talk of anything but Nynaeve's healing swan and Liana. Nynaeve repeated 3 times rather anxiously that healing Logain had been an accident, and Elaine's work with Terangrial. Those were remarkable feats, especially Nynaeve's, but there was only so much they could say, and there were only so many times Egwene could tell them how marvelous what they had done was, and how much she envied them. Trying to demonstrate did not last long. Egwene had no real feel for healing, especially not this complicated tapestry Nynaeve wove without thought. And though she had an affinity for metals and very good strength in both fire and earth, Elaine lost her almost immediately. Of course, they wanted to know what life was like among the Aiel. From the startled blinks and shocked laughs, abruptly cut off, she was not sure they believed everything she told them, and she certainly did not tell everything. The Aiel led naturally into Rand. Both women stared all through her rendition of his meeting with the Aes Sedai. They agreed that he was wading waters deeper than he knew, and needed someone to guide him before he stepped into a hole.
I'll be right
Elaine
back,
thought
everyone.
Min might help with
I'm
that,
sorry,
once the
I
embassy
think
reached
that
Camelin.
was okay.
This was the first Egwene knew Min was with him, or had been in Salidar, though in truth Elaine seemed rather half-hearted. And she muttered something truly peculiar, as if it were a truth she did not like hearing. "Min is a better woman than I am." For some reason that got a sympathetic look from Nynaeve. "I wish I were there," Elaine went on in a stronger voice. "To guide him, I mean." She looked from Egwene to Nynaeve, red touching her cheeks. "Well, that too." Nynaeve and Egwene began laughing so hard they nearly fell out of their chairs, and Elaine joined in almost immediately. "There's one good thing to tell, Elaine," Egwene said breathlessly, still trying to recover. Then she realized exactly what she was going to say, and why. Light. What a mire she had stepped into, and while laughing. "I'm sorry about your mother, Elaine. You don't know how I wished I could offer my condolences before this." Elaine looked confused, as well she might. "The point is, Rand means to give you the Lion Throne and the Sun Throne." To her surprise, Elaine sat up very straight. "He does he?" she said in a cool, flat voice. "He intends to give them to me." Her chin rose slightly. "I have some claim to the Sun Throne, and if I choose to make it, I will do so in my own right. As for the Lion Throne, Rand al'Thor has no right, none, to give me what is mine already." "I'm sure he didn't mean it that way," Egwene protested. "Did he? He loves you, Elaine. I know he does." "If only it were that simple," Elaine muttered, whatever that was supposed to mean. Nynaeve sniffed. "Men always say they didn't mean it that way. You would think they spoke a different language." "When I put my hands on him again," Elaine said firmly, "I will teach him to speak the right language. Give me." It was all Egwene could do not to laugh again. The next time Elaine laid hands on Rand, she would be too busy hunting a secluded spot to teach him anything. This was very like old times. Now your Aes Sedai, you can go to him anytime you want. Nobody can stop you. A quick look passed between the pair. "The Hall isn't letting anyone just pick up and leave," Nynaeve said. "And even if she could, we found something I think is more important." Elaine nodded vigorously. "I think so too. I'll admit the first thought I had when I heard you announced Amerlin was that now maybe Nynaeve and I could go find it. Well, the second. The first was a sort of stunned joy." Egwene blinked in confusion. "You found something, but now you need to find it." Leaning forward in their chairs, they answered eagerly and almost on top of one another. "We found it," Elaine said, "but only in Tel Riod. We used need," Nynaeve added. "We certainly needed something." "It's a bowl," Elaine continued. "A Turangrial, and I think it might be strong enough to change the weather. Only the bowl is somewhere in Ebu Dar, in an awful tangled warren of streets with no signs or anything to help. The Hall sent a letter to Merlilla, but she'll never find it, especially since she is supposed to be busy convincing Queen Tylan that the real White Tower is here. We told them it needed a man in the channeling," Nynaeve sighed. "Of course, that was before Loghain, though I don't think they would trust him." "It doesn't really need a man," Elaine said. "We just wanted to make them believe they needed Rand. I don't know how many women it does need. Maybe a full circle of 13. "Elaine says it's very powerful, Egwene. It could make the weather right again. I'd welcome that, just to get my weather sense straight again." "The bowl can make it right, Egwene." Elaine exchanged happy looks with Nynaeve. "All you have to do is send us to Ebu Dar." The flood receded, and Egwene leaned back in her chair. "I will do what I can. Maybe there'll be no objection now that you're Aes Sedai." She had the feeling there would be, though. Raising them had seemed such a bold stroke, but she was beginning to believe it was not quite so simple. "What you can?" Elaine said incredulously. "You are the Amerlin's seat, Egwene. You give a command, and Aes Sedai jump." She flashed a quick grin. "Say jump, and I'll prove it." Grimacing, Egwene shifted on the cushions. "I'm the Amerlin, but... Elaine, Shiriam doesn't have to think very hard to recall a novice named Egwene staring goggle-eyed at everything and being sent to race new garden walks for eating apples after bedtime. She means to lead me by the hand, or maybe push me by the scruff of my neck. Romanda and Lilane both wanted to be Amerlin, and they see that novice too. They intend to show me where to put my feet as much as Shiriam does." Nynaeve frowned worriedly, but Elaine was pure indignation. "You can't let them get away with trying to bully you. You are the Amerlin. The Amerlin tells the Hall what to do, not the other way around. You have to stand up and make them see the Amerlin seat." Egwene's laugh had a touch of bitterness. Had it only been last night that she was so defiant about being bullied? "That will take a little time, Elaine. You see, I finally understood why they chose me. Part is for Rand, I think. Maybe they believe he'll be more amenable if he sees me wearing the stole. The other part is because they remember that novice. A woman, no, a girl, who's so used to doing as she's told that there will be no trouble making her do as they want." She fingered the striped stole around her neck. Well, whatever their reasons, they chose me Amerlin, and since they did, I mean to be Amerlin. But I have to be careful, at first anyway. Maybe Swan made the hall jump every time she frowned. She wondered whether that had ever been true. But if I try that, I might just be the first Amerlin ever deposed the day after she was raised. Elaine looked dumbfounded, but Nynaeve nodded slowly. Perhaps being wisdom and dealing with the women's circle back home had given her more insight into how the Amerlin's seat and the hall of the tower actually worked together than all of Elaine's training to be queen. Elaine, once word spreads and rulers know about me, I can begin making the hall realize they chose an Amerlin, not a puppet. But until then, they really could take this stowaway as fast as they gave it. I mean, if I'm not really Amerlin, then it isn't hard to push me aside. There might be a few mutters, but I have no doubt they could smooth those over fast enough. If anyone outside Saldidar ever heard somebody named Egwene Alvir was raised Amerlin, it would just be one of those peculiar rumors that grow up around Aes Sedai. What are you going to do? Elaine asked quietly. You are not going to accept it meekly. That made Egwene smile wholeheartedly. It was not a question, but a firm statement of fact. No, I am not. She had listened to a number of Moiraine's lectures to Rand about the game of houses. Back then, she had thought the game absurd and worse than underhanded. Now she hoped she could remember everything she had heard. The Aiel always said, use the weapons you have. It may help that they're trying to fit me for 3 different leashes. I can pretend to be pulled by one or the other, depending on which is closest to what I want to do. Once in a while, I can do just what I want, the way I did raising you two, but not very often yet. Squaring her shoulders, she met their gazes levelly. I would like to say I raised you because you deserved it, but the truth is I did it because you're my friends, and because I hope as full sisters you can help me. I certainly don't know who else I can trust except you two. I will send you to Ebu Dar as soon as I can, but before and after, you are who I can discuss things with. I know you will tell me the truth. That trip to Ebu Dar may not take as long as you might think. You two have made all sorts of discoveries, so I hear. But if I can puzzle a few things out, I may have one of my own. That will be wonderful, Elaine said. But she sounded almost absent-minded. Chapter 37. When battle begins. The silence was very peculiar, and Egwene did not understand at all. Elaine looked at Nynaeve. Then they both looked at Nynaeve's slim silver bracelet. Nynaeve shifted her gaze to Egwene, wide-eyed, and quickly put it on the floor. I have a confession, she said in a near whisper. Her voice never rose, but words spilled out in a rush. I captured Moghedien. Without raising her eyes, she lifted her wrist with the bracelet. This is an Idam. We're holding her prisoner, and nobody knows, except Swan and Lyanna and Brigitte, and now you. We had to, Elaine said, leaning forward urgently. They'd have executed her, Egwene. I know she deserves it, but her head is full of knowledge, things we hardly dream of. That's where all of our discoveries came from, except Nynaeve's healing Swan and Lyanna and Loghain, and my Terangrial. They would have killed her without waiting to learn anything. Questions whirled through Egwene's head dizzyingly. They had captured one of the Forsaken? How? Elaine had made an Idam? Egwene shivered, barely able to look at the thing. It looked nothing like the Idam she knew far too well. Even with that, how had they managed to keep one of the Forsaken hidden among so many Aes Sedai? One of the Forsaken, prisoner, not tried and executed. As suspicious as Rand had become, if he ever discovered that, he would never trust Elaine again. Bring her here, she managed to say hollowly. Nynaeve bounced out of her chair and ran. The noises of celebration, laughter and music and song swelled for a moment before the door banged shut behind her. Egwene rubbed her temples. One of the Forsaken. That is quite a secret to keep. Elaine's cheeks colored. Why, under the light? Of course. Elaine, I have no intention of asking about Anybody I'm not supposed to know about. The golden-haired woman actually jumped. I may be able to talk. Later. Tomorrow, maybe. Egwene, you have to promise me you won't say anything, not to anybody, unless I say so. No matter what you see, if that's what you want. Egwene did not understand why the other woman was so agitated. Not really. Elaine had a secret that Egwene shared. Only Egwene had found out by accident, and ever since they had both been pretending it was still Elaine's secret alone. She had met with Brigitte, the hero out of legend, in Tel Riad. Maybe she still did. Wait, that was what Nynaeve had said. Brigitte knew about Moghedien. Did she mean the woman waiting in Tel Riad for the Horn of Valier to call her back? Nynaeve knew the secret that Elaine had refused to admit to Egwene, even when she was caught out? No. This was not going to turn into a round of accusations and denials. Elaine, I am the Amerlin. Really the Amerlin, and I already have plans. The wise ones who channel handle a good many of their weaves differently from Aes Sedai. Elaine already knew about the wise ones, though come to think of it, Egwene did not know whether the Aes Sedai did. The other Aes Sedai now. Sometimes what they do is more complicated or more crude, but at times it's simpler than we were taught in the tower, and works just as well. You want Aes Sedai to study with the Aiel? Elaine's mouth quirked in amusement. Egwene, they'll never agree to that. Not if you live 1,000 years. I suppose they'll want to test Aiel girls for novices when they find out, though. Shifting on her cushions, Egwene hesitated. Aes Sedai studying with the wise ones? As apprentices? It would never happen. But Romanda and Lelaine especially might benefit from a little Jade. And Shiriam, and Mirella, and... She found a more comfortable way to sit and gave up her fancies. I doubt the wise ones will agree to Aiel girls becoming novices. They might have once, possibly, but certainly not now. Now it would be as much as Egwene could expect for them to speak civilly to Aes Sedai. I thought some sort of association. Elaine, there are fewer than 1,000 Aes Sedai. If you include those who remain in the Waste, I think there are more wise ones who can channel than there are Aes Sedai. Maybe many more. Anyway, they don't miss a one with the spark born in her. How many women had died on this side of the Dragon Wall because they suddenly could channel, maybe without realizing what they were doing at all, and had no one to teach them? I want to bring in more women, Elaine. What about women who can learn but no Aes Sedai found them before they were thought too old for novices? I say if she wants to learn, let her try. Even if she's 40 or 50, or her grandchildren have grandchildren. Elaine hugged herself, laughing. Oh, Egwene, the Accepted will just love teaching those novice classes. They'll have to learn how, Egwene said firmly. She did not see the problem. Aes Sedai had always said you could be too old for a novice, but if you wanted to learn... They had changed their minds partway already. In the crowd, she had seen faces older than Nynaeve's above novice white. The tower has always been severe about excluding people, Elaine. If you aren't strong enough, you're put out. Refuse to take a test and you're sent away. Fail a test and out. They should be allowed to stay if they want. But the tests are to make sure you're strong enough, Elaine protested. Not just in the one power, in yourself. Surely you don't want Aes Sedai who will break the first time they come under pressure? Or Aes Sedai who can barely channel? Egwene sniffed. Cerelia would have been put out of the tower without ever being tested for Accepted. Maybe they can't be Aes Sedai, but that doesn't mean they are useless. After all, they're already trusted to use the power with at least some discretion, or they wouldn't be sent off into the world. My dream is for every woman who can channel to be connected to the tower somehow. Every last one. The Windfinders? Elaine winced when Egwene nodded. You didn't betray them, Elaine. I can't believe they kept their secret as long as they did. Elaine sighed heavily. Well, what's done is done. You can't put honey back in the comb. But if your Aiel gets special protection, the Sea Folk should too. Let the Windfinders teach their girls. No Sea Folk women bundled off by Aes Sedai, whatever they will. Done. Egwene spat on her palm and held out her hand, and after a moment Elaine spat on hers and grinned as they clasped to seal the bargain. Slowly that grin faded. Is this about Rand and his amnesty, Egwene? In part. Elaine, how could the man be so... There was no way to finish that, and no answer anyway. The other woman nodded a touch sadly, in understanding or agreement or both. The door opened, and a sturdy woman in dark wool appeared, a silver tray in her hands with 3 silver cups and a long-necked silver wine pitcher. Her face was worn, a farm wife's face, but her dark eyes glittered as she studied Egwene and Elaine with a shifting gaze. Egwene had just a moment to feel surprised that the woman wore a close-fitting silver necklace despite her drab dress, and then Nynaeve entered behind her, shutting the door. She must have run like the wind, because she had found time to exchange the accepted's dress for a dark blue silk, embroidered with golden scrolls around the neckline and hem. It was not nearly so low-cut as what Berelaine wore, but still considerably lower than Egwene expected to see on Nynaeve. "This is Marigan," Nynaeve said, drawing her braid over her shoulder in a practiced motion. Her great serpent ring shone golden on her right hand. Egwene started to ask why she emphasized the name so, then abruptly realized that Marigan's necklace was a match for the bracelet on Nynaeve's wrist. She could not help staring. The woman certainly did not look anything like she expected one of the Forsaken to look. She said as much, and Nynaeve laughed. "Watch, Egwene." She did more than watch. She nearly leaped out of her chair, and she did embrace Saidar. As soon as Nynaeve spoke, the glow had surrounded Marigan, only for an instant, but before it faded, the woman in the plain wool dress changed completely. Actually, they were rather small changes, but they added up to a different woman, handsome rather than beautiful, but not at all worn. A woman who was proud, even regal. Only the eyes remained the same, glittering, but no matter how they shifted, Egwene could believe this woman was Moghedian. "How?" was all she said. She listened carefully as Nynaeve and Elaine explained about weaving disguises and inverting weaves, but she watched Moghedian. She was proud, and full of herself, full of being herself again. "Put her back," Egwene said when the explanations were done. Again, the glow of Saidar lasted only moments, and once it faded, there were no weaves that she could see. Moghedian was plain and worn again, a countrywoman who had led a hard life and looked older than her years. Those black eyes glittered at Egwene, filled with hate, and maybe self-loathing as well. Realizing she still held Saidar, Egwene felt foolish for a moment. Neither Nynaeve nor Elaine had embraced the source. But then Nynaeve was wearing that bracelet. Egwene stood, never taking her gaze from Moghedian, and held out her hand. If anything, Nynaeve seemed eager to have the thing off her wrist, which Egwene could understand. Handing the bracelet over, Nynaeve said, "Put the tray on the table, Marigan, and be on your best behavior. Egwene has been living with the Aiel." Egwene turned the silver band over in her hands and tried not to shiver. Cunning work, segmented so cleverly it almost appeared solid. She had been on the other end of an Idam once, a Shanchan device with a silver leash connecting necklace and bracelet, but still the same. Her stomach roiled as it had not, facing the hall or the crowd. It stewed as though trying to make up for being still before. Deliberately, she closed the length of silver around her wrist. She had some idea of what to expect, but she still almost jumped. The other woman's emotions were laid out before her, her physical state, all gathered in one fenced-off portion of Egwene's mind. Mainly there was pulsing fear, but the self-loathing she thought she saw swelled nearly as strongly.
Both of them are passed
Moghedian
out
did not like her present appearance.
next to
Maybe
me,
she especially did not
the
like
other
it
one
after a
is
short return to
back
her
there.
own. Egwene thought of who it was she was looking at. One of the Forsaken, a woman whose name had been used to frighten children for centuries, a woman whose crimes deserved death 100 times over. She thought of the knowledge in that head. She made herself smile. It was not a pretty smile. She did not mean it to be, but she did not think she could have made it one if she tried. They're right. I have been living with the Aiel. So if you expect me to be as gentle as Nynaeve and Elaine, put it out of your mind. Set just one foot wrong with me,
Right.
and I'll make you beg for death. Only I won't
Ozzy's
kill
at the
you.
point where
I will just find
he's
some way
passed
to make
out,
that face
but
permanent.
if I were to pick him
On
up
the other
and just
hand,
hold him
if
here,
you do more than put a foot
probably using one
wrong,
hand, he'll
she
start
widened
falling
her
asleep
smile
again.
until it was just showing teeth. The fear leaped so high it drowned everything else and bulged against the fence. Standing in front of the table, Moghedien clutched her skirts white-knuckle tight and trembled visibly. Nynaeve and Elaine were looking at Egwene as if they had never seen her before. Light. Did they expect her to be polite to one of the Forsaken? Cyrilla would stake the woman out in the sun to bring her to heel if she did not simply slit her throat out of hand. Egwene moved closer to Moghedien. The other woman was taller, but she cowered back against the table, knocking over the wine cups on their tray and rocking the pitcher. Egwene made her voice cold. It did not have far to go. The day I detect one lie out of you is the day I execute you myself. Now, I have considered traveling from one place to another by boring a hole, so to speak, from here to there. A hole through the pattern, so there's no distance between one end and the other. How well will that work? Not at all for you or any woman, Moghedien said, breathless and quick. The fear that boiled inside was plain on her face now. That is how men travel. The capital was plain. She was speaking of one of the lost talents. If you try, you will be sucked into, I don't know what it is. The space between the threads of the pattern, maybe. I don't think you would live very long. I know you would never come back. Traveling, Nynaeve muttered disgustedly. We never thought of traveling. No, we didn't. Elaine sounded no more pleased with herself. I wonder what else we never thought of. Egwene ignored them. Then how? She asked softly. A quiet voice was always better than shouting. Moghedien flinched as though she had shouted anyway. You make the two places in the pattern identical. I can show you how. It takes a little effort because of the necklace, but I can... Like this, Egwene said, embracing Saidar, and wove flows of spirit. This time she was not trying to touch the world of dreams, but she expected something much the same if it worked. What she got was quite different. The thin curtain she wove did not produce the shimmering effect, and it lasted only a moment before snapping together in a vertical line that was suddenly a slash of silvery blue light. The light itself widened quickly, or perhaps turned, it looked that way to her, into something. There in the middle of the floor was
watching a movie
a
over here
doorway.
too.
Not at all the misty view she had had of Tel Riyadh from her tent. A doorway opening onto a sun-blasted land that made the worst of the drought here look lush. Stone spires and sharp cliffs loomed over a dusty yellow clay plain cut by fissures and dotted with a few scrub bushes that had a thorny look even at a distance. Egwene very nearly stared. That was the Aiel Waste, halfway between Cold Rock's Hold and the Valley of Roidian, a spot where it was very unlikely there would be anyone to see or be heard. Rand's precautions with his special room in the Sun Palace had suggested she take some too, but she had only hoped to reach it, and she had been sure it would be seen through a shimmering curtain.
No, that's no problem.
Light? Elaine breathed. Do you know what you've done, Egwene? Do you? I think I can do it. If you repeat the weave again, I know I'll remember. Remember what? Nynaeve practically wailed. How did she do it? Oh, curse this cursed block. Elaine, kick my ankle, please. Moghedien's face had gone very still. Uncertainty rolled through the bracelet almost as heavily as fear. Reading emotions was hardly like reading words on a page, but those two were clear. Who? Moghedien licked her lips. Who taught you that? Egwene smiled as she had seen Aes Sedai smile. At least she hoped it conveyed mystery. Never be too sure I don't already know the answer, she said coolly. Remember, Lie to me once. Suddenly it occurred to her how this must sound to Nynaeve and Elaine. They had captured the woman, held her captive in the most impossible circumstances, pried all sorts of information out of her. Turning to them, she gave a small, rueful laugh. I am sorry. I didn't mean to just take over. Why should you be sorry? Elaine wore a broad smile. You are supposed to take over, Egwene. Nynaeve gave her braid a yank, then glared at it. Nothing seems to work. Why can't I get angry? Oh, you can keep her forever for all of me. We couldn't take her to Abu Dar anyway. Why can't I get angry? Oh, blood and bloody ashes. Her eyes went wide as she realized what she had said, and she clapped a hand over her mouth. Egwene glanced at Moghedien. The woman was busily setting the wine cups upright again and pouring wine with a smell of sweet spices, but something had come through the bracelet while Nynaeve was talking. Shock, perhaps? Maybe she would prefer the mistress she knew to one who threatened death in almost her first breath. A firm knock sounded at the door, and Egwene hastily released Saidar. The opening to the waist vanished. Come. Swan took one step into the study and stopped, taking in Moghedien, the bracelet on Egwene's wrist, Nynaeve and Elaine. Shutting the door, she made a curtsy as minimal as anything from Romanda or Lelaine. Mother, I've come to instruct you in etiquette, but if you would rather I returned later? Her eyebrows rose, calmly questioning. Go, Egwene told Moghedien. If Nynaeve and Elaine were willing to let her run loose, the Idam must limit her, if not as much as one with a leash. Fingering the bracelet, she hated the thing, but she intended to wear it day and night. She added, but keep yourself available. I'll treat trying to escape the same as a lie. Fear gushed through the Idam as Moghedien scurried out. That could be a problem. How had Nynaeve and Elaine lived with those torrents of dread? Still, that was for later. Facing Swan, she folded her arms beneath her breasts. This won't do, Swan. I know everything. Daughter. Swan tilted her head. Sometimes knowing gives no advantage whatsoever. Sometimes it only means sharing the danger. Swan, Elaine said, half shocked and half warning, and to Egwene's surprise, Swan did something she had never expected to see Swan Sanche do. She blushed. You can't expect me to become somebody else overnight, the woman muttered grumpily. Egwene suspected Nynaeve and Elaine could help with what she had to do, but if she was really going to be Amerlin, she had to do it alone. Elaine, I know you want to get out of that acceptance dress. Why don't you do that? And then see what you find out about lost talents. Nynaeve, you do the same. A look passed between them. Then they glanced at Swan and rose to make perfect curtsies, respectfully murmuring, as you command, Mother. There was no evidence of any impression on Swan. She stood watching Egwene with a wry expression while they left. Egwene embraced Saidar again, briefly, to slide her chair back into place behind the table, then adjusted her stole and sat. For a long moment she regarded Swan silently. I need you, she said at last. You know what it is to be Amerlin, what the Amerlin can and cannot do. You know the sitters, how they think, what they want. I need you, and I mean to have you. Shiriam and Ramanda and Lelaine may think I still wear novice white under this stole. Maybe they all do. But you are going to help me show them differently. I'm not asking you, Swan. I will have your help. All there was to do then was wait. Swan regarded her, then gave a slight shake of her head and laughed softly. They made a very bad mistake, didn't they? Of course, I made it first. The plump little grunter for the table turns out to be a live silver pike as long as your leg. Spreading her skirts wide, she made a deep curtsy, inclining her head. Mother, please allow me to serve and advise. So long as you know it's only advice, Swan. I have too many people already who think they can tie strings to my arms and legs. I won't put up with it from you. I'd as soon try tying strings to myself, Swan said dryly. You know, I never really liked you. Maybe it was because I saw too much of myself in you. In that case, Egwene said in just as dry a tone, you can call me Egwene when we're alone. Now sit down and tell me why the hall is still sitting here, and how I can get them moving. Swan started to pull one of the chairs over before remembering she could move it with Sidar now. They are sitting because once they move, the White Tower really is broken. As for how to get them moving, my advice... Her advice took a long time. Some of it went along lines Egwene had already thought of, and all of it seemed good. In her room in the little tower, Romanda poured mint tea for 3 other sitters, only one a yellow. The room was in the back, but the sounds of festival penetrated. Romanda ignored them studiously. These 3 had been ready to support her for the Amerlin seat. Voting for the girl had been as much a way to keep Lelaine from being raised as anything else. Lelaine would burn if she ever knew that. Now that Shiriam had her child Amerlin installed, these 3 were still willing to listen, especially after the business of raising accepted to the shawl by decree. That had to be Shiriam's doing. She and her little clique had pampered all 4. It had been their notion to lift Theodrin and Phaelane above the other accepted, and they had suggested it for Elaine and Nynaeve as well at one time. Frowning, she wondered what was keeping Delana, but she began talking anyway, after sheathing the room in Sidar against eavesdropping. Delana would just have to catch up when she came. The important thing was that Shiriam was going to learn she had not gained as much power as she thought by snatching the job of keeper. In a house halfway across Salidar, Lelaine was serving chilled wine to 4 sitters, only one from her own blue Aja. Sidar laced the room against listeners. The sounds of celebration made her smile. The 4 women with her had suggested she try for the Amerlin seat herself, and she had not been reluctant, but a failure would have meant Romanda being raised instead, which would have pained Lelaine as much as being exiled. How Romanda would gnash her teeth if she ever learned they had all voted for the child just to keep the stole from Romanda's own shoulders. What they had gathered to discuss, though, was how to lessen Shiriam's influence now she had managed to grab the keeper's stole. That farce of raising accepted to Aes Sedai by the girl's decree. Shiriam's head must have swollen to madness. As the talk went on, Lelaine began to wonder where Delana was. She should have been there by now. Delana sat in her room, staring at Halima perched on the edge of Delana's bed. The name Asangar was never to be used. Sometimes Delana was afraid Halima would know if she even thought it. The ward against eavesdropping was small, enclosing just the pair of them. That is madness, she managed at last. Don't you understand? If I continue to try supporting every faction, they will catch me out sooner or later. Everyone must take some risks. The firmness of the woman's voice belied the smile on that lush mouth. And you will continue to press for gentling Loghain again. That or killing him. A slight grimace actually made the woman more beautiful somehow. If they ever brought him out of that house, I would attend to it myself. Delana could not imagine how, but she would not doubt the woman until she failed. What I don't understand is why you are so afraid of a man with 6 sisters shielding him from sunup to sunup. Halima's green eyes blazed as she leaped to her feet. I am not afraid, and don't you ever suggest it. I want Loghain severed or dead, and that is all you have to know. Do we understand one another? Not for the first time, Delana considered killing the other woman, but as always, she had a sinking certainty that she would be the one to die. Somehow, Halima knew when she embraced Sidar, even if Halima could not channel herself. The worst of it was the possibility that because Halima needed her, she would not kill her. Delana could not imagine what she might do instead, but the very vagueness of the threat made her shudder. She should be able to kill the woman right there, right then. Yes, Halima, she said meekly, and hated herself for it. So good of you, Swan murmured, holding her cup for Lelaine to add a small splash of brandy in her tea. The sun was sinking toward the horizon, giving the light a reddish cast, but the streets outside were still raucous. You have no idea how tiring it is trying to teach that girl etiquette. She seemed to think as long as she behaves like a wisdom from back home, everything will be fine. The hall is supposed to be the women's circle or some such thing. Lelaine made sympathetic noises over her own tea. You say she was complaining about Romanda? Swan shrugged. Something about Romanda insisting we stay here instead of marching for Tar Valon, as near as I could make out. Like the girl has a temper like a fisher bird in mating season. I almost wanted to take her by the shoulders and shake her. But of course she does wear the stole now. Well, once I finish my lectures, I'm done with her. Do you remember? Smiling inside, Swan watched Lelaine drinking it all in with the tea. Only the first sentence had really been important. The bit about a temper was her own addition, but it might make some of the sitters walk a little more carefully around Egwene. Besides, she suspected it might be true. She would never be Amerlin again herself, and she was fairly certain that trying to manipulate Egwene would be as futile as trying to manipulate herself had been, and as painful. Yet teaching an Amerlin to be Amerlin, she looked forward to that as much as she had anything in a long time. Egwene Alvear would be an Amerlin to make thrones tremble. But what about my block? Nynaeve said, and Romanda frowned at her. They were in Romanda's room in the little tower, and this was when Romanda was supposed to have her according to the schedule the Yellows had set up. The music and laughter outside seemed to irritate the Yellow. You weren't so eager earlier. I heard that you told Dagdara you were Aes Sedai too, and she could find a lake and douse her head. Heat rose in Nynaeve's face. Trust her temper to get in the way. Maybe I just realized that being Aes Sedai doesn't mean I can channel any more easily than before. Romanda sniffed. Aes Sedai. You have a long way to go for that, whatever. Very well then. Something we haven't tried before. Jump up and down on one foot and talk. She sat down in a carved armchair near the bed, still frowning. Gossip, I think. Talk about light things. For instance, what was it the Amerlin said Lelaine wanted to talk about? For a moment, Nynaeve stared back indignantly. Jump on one foot? That was ridiculous. Still, she was not really here about her block anyway. Lifting her skirts, she began jumping. Egwene, the Amerlin, didn't say much. Something about having to stay put in Salidar. This had better work, or Egwene was going to hear a few choice words, Amerlin or no. I think this one will work better, Shiriam, Elaine said, handing over a twisted blue and red flecked ring of what had been stone this morning. In truth, it was no different from any other she had made. They stood apart from the crowd at the mouth of a narrow alley lit by the red sun. Behind them, fiddles squealed and flutes sang. Thank you, Elaine. Shiriam tucked the terangrial into her belt pouch without even looking at it. Elaine had caught Shiriam in a pause from dancing, her face a little flushed beneath all that cool Aes Sedai serenity.
All right, everyone. I'm going to call into this live for tonight. I want to thank everyone for stopping by. Yeah, I want to keep stopping by. I appreciate all y'all's support. Until next time, everyone. Y'all stay safe out there.